Hi, I'm Shana Meyerson with the Yoga of War podcast, here today for my 99th episode. Episode 100 drops this Sunday, and with it, my heartfelt thanks. After that, I'll be ushering in a new era as the Yoga of War bows out and my new podcast, Unapologetically Jewish, takes the stage. I hope you'll join me there. But today, I'm thrilled to be joined by Undiplomatic commentator Ruthie Blum. A sabra by nature, Ruthie is what I would consider the undiplomatic counterpart to Mark Regev's diplomatic leanings on their edgy JNS show, Israel Undiplomatic, a show that has been one of my personal sanity savers throughout the war. It is such an honor and a pleasure to welcome Ruthie and Mark to the Yoga of War podcast for my very special 99th and 100th episodes as they reflect on the war in Gaza, help us to understand the facts, and as we glean their profound insights. Sunday, we'll meet Mark. But for today, here's Ruthie. Ruthie Blum, a former advisor at the office of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, is an award-winning columnist and a senior contributing editor at JNS. Co-host with Ambassador Mark Regev of the JNS podcast, Israel Undiplomatic. She writes on Israeli politics and U.S.-Israel relations. Originally from New York, she moved to Israel in 1977. She's a regular guest on national and international media outlets, including Fox, Sky News, I-24 News, Scripps, ILTV, WION? Is that how you say it? Or WION? It's an acronym, and Newsmax. Ruthie, thank you so much for joining me. It's so wonderful to see you again.
Great to see you again, Shana, this time not in person, this time over Zoom, because the last time I saw you, when we actually sat in the same studio together at JNS.
It was amazing. And when I make Aliyah, I hope to sit with you in that studio a lot more often. Anyway, Ruthie, let's start with the big stuff and work our way down. Which describes you better, a right-wing bohemian or a sabra?
Oh, definitely a right-wing bohemian. Because, technically a sabra is someone born in Israel, and I was not born in
Oh,
Israel, although I did come here at a young age. Um, but I would say right-wing bohemian is definitely how to best describe me as.
okay. So I'm sure that that will come out throughout the show in that really interesting juxtaposition. Do you want to give like a brief explanation of how you came up with this term?
Yeah, well, my politics are right wing, but my lifestyle is pretty bohemian. And I now live in Tel Aviv, though I lived decades in Jerusalem. My I would say credo, you could say, is that I have extremely high societal standards that I don't believe that people necessarily can live up to them all the time. I believe there's such a thing as sin. And what I think, I believe in real freedom to live as you want, but that doesn't mean that every choice you make has to be approved by everyone around you, and you need to, parade down the street shouting that everyone has to accept you for it. And I include myself in that and anybody else. I think, as I said, I believe in freedom, economic freedom, political freedom. And, but that doesn't mean without restraint. And as I said, I believe there's such a thing as right and wrong, and you don't always live up to your standards, but you should not expect others to accept you just because you sin.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. Now that we got the important stuff out of the way, just so everybody knows, yes, we are going to get into Iran, but in the beginning, my goal is to sort of wrap up, so to speak, the Gaza war. I say wrap up because I think that a lot of people don't realize that the war is not over. But we'll get into all of that. So Ruthie, let's frame this just a little bit. I actually want to go back to October 6th or the months before. After these last 28 months or so, that honestly feels like a century. Before 10/7, right? Israel was embroiled in this heated judicial reform debate that had tens, if not hundreds of thousands of Israelis out on the streets for months on end. I have to say, even from here, it felt like a dam that was about to break and let in, let's call it a flood from outside. So Ruthie, feel free to comment on the nature of those judicial reform protests to the extent that you feel it's relevant. But most importantly, did you anticipate that they were going to invite a major terrorist attack from the salivating enemies on your borders?
Oh, no, I didn't expect that specifically from the protests because as long as I've lived in Israel, which is now going on 48 to 49 years, all we have are terrorist attacks of all kinds, wars and terrorist attacks. So I can't say that that particularly made me think we would have a terrorist attack. There were times during the protests that I thought, wow, what would happen if right now a Hamas rocket hit around here? I did think that, but that was because we were used to having Hamas rockets periodically. We would have periodic,
Mm-hmm.
2021, we had Hamas rockets. So I did think about that. And I also thought what a danger it was. One of the problems with those protests was they were blocking roads and burning tires in the roads. Now, imagine a scenario, and this happened many times, where you're in a car with two little children and they need to go to the bathroom and they are blocked. There's traffic and they can't go forward and they can't go backward either. So there were people stuck in cars for hours, people with pacemakers. Imagine an ambulance trying to get through to somebody, little children screaming, people hungry. People had just picked up their kids, let's say from school, or were on their way home or whatever it was. It was appalling. All right. Now, first of all, just so you should know, I don't care what side of the political spectrum you're on. I don't care if you are disabled and you are protesting for better conditions and better wheelchairs, or if you're protesting on behalf of Palestinians or judicial reform or against it for it. I am always opposed to blocking highways. It is
Mm-hmm.
so dangerous. And now it's true, it certainly is dangerous if your enemies look at you and they think, when they see that, that there are protesters in there. It's not like in Iran where those protesters are gunned down in the streets. Here, the police, for example, the Tel Aviv head of police at the time, he was like a hero to them. He was on their side. So, I mean, and the enemies, our enemies, consider that a huge sign of weakness, even though we consider it a sign of strength, that we have such a robust democracy that we can protest and we can do it whatever we want with impunity. All right. Although, as I said, blocking highways is disgusting. So I didn't anticipate October 7th. Nobody did,
Well, hold on.
unfortunately.
I'm going to get to that. I was just curious specifically because I have to say that I said many times from here, from Los Angeles, that it felt like a civil war. Reservists were saying out loud they would not serve if asked. Obviously, we know that did not happen. They served, and they served in tremendous and unexpected numbers. But from the outside, I was biting my nail saying the enemy is going to look at this and say, Israeli society is divided. We have the fracture that we need. Let's wait for them to continue to devolve. And that's going to present a perfect platform for us to make an attack. I'm surprised that did not, I mean, that was just my personal, but I'm surprised that did not feel like on your radar. Interesting.
Well, a lot of people said civil war, civil war. I mean, mainly the left said it,
Yeah.
right? Because they wanted it.
Yeah.
We had members of the left saying, we need civil war. Okay.
Right.
I tell you, when you live in Israel, this happened. You have to keep in mind that those protests erupted after the government was democratically elected and it was a majority. All right. So when
Right.
you see all the people in the streets and they are saying they are the majority, you say, no, sorry, you're not. Okay. We, whoever elected this government, we're the majority. And if you don't like it, go to the ballot box next time and try to vote us out. Okay. But I had people saying to me, oh no, we can't do that because by the next election, Netanyahu will have banned elections.
Hi, it
Sound
sounds
familiar?
familiar. Yes, it does.
Huh? So I said, oh, don't be ridiculous. That is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard and all that. But the thing that was, and also in all the years I've lived here, there have been plenty of protests, and there even during the Second Lebanon War, the First Lebanon War, whatever, there were soldiers saying, we can't fight, and things like that. And over the years, there's always been this issue of, oh, there's going to be civil war. So first of all, the Jewish people have always been like that, including in times of the Bible. The Exodus from Egypt. You had those Jews saying, "Let's go back to Egypt." The other that's how we behave, okay? But when you're walking through the desert, you're not blocking traffic on the Ayalon highway, all right?
Yeah.
That's so we've had this before, but what made these protests special, I would say, aside from the fact that many people who don't remember previous ones, you know how when something happens, you always say, wow, this is the worst it's ever been, all
Mm-hmm.
right? As Trump would say, it's never been as great. This is nobody's ever seen anything like it. So I didn't feel that way about those protests. What
Okay.
I felt was, first of all, one of the things that differentiated it was the fact that it was heavily funded by outside forces, Israelis as well, but also outside forces, progressive funds. We know it also because the costumes, the flags, everything they did was uniform. Okay, now
Right.
the key things they did was from a PR perspective was they're demonstrating against the government and against the judicial reform, and they all were told to carry Israeli flags to show that they're
Yeah.
patriots. It was a
Yeah.
purposeful move. And anytime Palestinian flags turned up at one of those protests, others said to them, get rid of those, get rid of those. We don't want them to say we're a bunch of leftists because what we're saying is, no, we're the true Zionist Israelis who just don't want us to destroy the Supreme Court, all right? And so they didn't want any other kind of progressive message getting through. However, one of the things that was happening during those protests was a bunch of women and men, by the way, mostly women, but also men, dressed in these red costumes from the what's it called, Handmaid's Tale. And if anybody has seen that show, that series, these red the women who were the I would say the ones giving birth to the babies that that anybody who hasn't seen it won't know what I'm talking about or read the book. But so they were traipsing around, and by the way, those costumes are expensive. Okay, these weren't little like Purim costumes you get at a junk store. Parading around saying that if this judicial reform takes place, women are going to end up being slaves. Now, when you see that there are slaves actually in the world
Yeah.
and in all the countries surrounding Israel, the women really are downtrodden and treated like this. And these women were all
Right.
college educated, affluent. They've all been to, everywhere from, Paris, Berlin, Disneyland, whatever you want. Traipsing around in those costumes,
Yeah.
it was just, it was, as far as I'm concerned, it was nauseating. It was also hilarious. It was like, oh,
Yeah.
hilarious. Who are you kidding?
Yeah.
And the other part that was funny and annoying was that some of us called it the white protest. And what did we mean by white? White haired, a lot of boomers and above who were missing the old days of like 60s protests or something out there, white haired, but also white skinned, meaning Ashkenazi, of European descent, because many of the voters or supporters of the current government are actually Mizrahi from, originally, as I say, originally from Arab countries or, North Africa. So we called it their white on white
Mm,
demonstrations. And they really did look funny. It was like, give me
yeah,
a break, you aging hippies. So you had these women in their ridiculous costumes, and
right.
you had a bunch of, you know, aging, I don't know what you would call it, because they aren't exactly hippies because they were kind of rich and everything. Retirees, let's put it that
Okay.
way, traipsing around. And also because a lot of other people said, when the right wing said, how come we never do that? The
Yeah,
left is always organizing and going out to the streets. And one thing people said was, sorry, we have jobs. We have to go to
right,
work. We have
right.
kids. We have this. We can't like go spend all our time on the street. Okay.
And by the way, we can't get to work because the street is being blocked. So Ruthie,
Exactly.
when you're saying all this and you're like, what would you call them? I would call them the left wing bohemians.
Oh, yes. And by the way, they don't even
Yeah,
deserve the title of the Bohemians, and I'll tell
yeah.
you why. I'll tell you
Okay.
why.
Yeah.
Because if you think about like the connotations of bohemian, it's sort of like you're living kind of in a kind of sloppy pad, I don't know, sort of teenager like or college like a dorm, or you're living kind of in a, you're not bourgeois, let's say. These
Okay.
people all are property owners. And as I say, they go
Okay.
vacation to every place in Europe and everything. These are people with money. So,
Yeah.
to call them bohemian, and they all had,
Okay.
that these are people who spend all their time talking about the renovations they're doing on their property and whether they
Okay.
should have extra property in Europe or whatever. So, give me a break, bohemian. But a lot of them had,
Okay.
let's say, the men had gray ponytails. Okay.
Okay. So great. That was more than probably most people needed, but I love hearing about it. It's interesting because on a few things. One is like to sort of explain what I was seeing from Los Angeles. It felt like it exposed certain vulnerabilities that unfortunately Israel, because of all the double standards, they never stop. They know, but Israel does not generally have the same sort of liberties as other nations in exposing their weaknesses. And from here, Israel looked weak, But for me, like, I mean, America looks weak when I see these same idiots, all over the streets in LA and in DC and New York and all the things. Like, so that was what got me worried. And here's what's interesting, Ruthie. I actually saw the flags a different way. And again, like it shows how things are so different from the inside from someone who knows or someone from outside. Because I walked through those protests. I'm not in the streets, but on the Tayela in Tel Aviv. And first of all, for anybody who didn't see the protests, it's not at least the one in the Tayela. It's people singing and standing in sort of like waving Israeli flags. But the way that I saw it was, we come here to protest something we don't like, but when we go home, we're still all Israelis, and we still sit with our grandparents and our parents and our neighbors, and we may have disagreements. But from America's point of view, where we're so splintered, we're so big, it would be impossible not to be. When I see Israel, I see one nation under God, the way that I wish America were. So it's funny that I saw the flags in a very, very different way as your informed viewpoint. And the other thing that people like, I don't even know if people in Israel understood, but definitely outside of Israel, the irony of the judicial reform in the first place was that it's to make the Israeli judicial process more in line with the American one, right? Where there's checks and balances instead of absolute power. But people were like, oh, this is fascist, this and that. It's like, no, it's actually increasing the democratic, but the BDS, not the BDS, but the BB derangement syndrome is strong, just like the TDS is here in America. So anyway, you started to answer it before. Did you ever expect that an attack like what occurred on 10/7 would come someday, especially from Hamas rather than Hezbollah? And did you ever think I mean, really, did you ever think it would be this brutal and, for a lack of a better term, successful?
No, well, let me separate that in two parts. Once it happened, aside from the massive trauma and nobody expected it, etc.,
Mm-hmm.
and we have still a lot of questions to answer. Where was the army? Why did it take everyone so long, etc.? There are many, many questions, and how many people were slaughtered that day, and how many soldiers have been killed since then, and all the kidnapped victims. And my own son and son-in-law were off in reserve duty immediately for months, and um, but it's not surprising. The brutality of it did not surprise me
Really?
because because these jihadis tell you who they are all the time. And we had what they used to call it, like lone wolves. Every attack was disgusting. It wasn't just like I'm coming up and shooting you and you're dead. They usually involve knives and beheadings and rapes, and I mean that it was that brutal did not surprise me. It's just the scale of it, and it surprised all Israelis that all those guys had to do was shoot at the technology. One of the things that the army kept telling us is that Hamas doesn't want a large scale war, but also we're protected because we have high tech. We have high tech fences and high tech cameras and all of this stuff. Okay. So, when you think about it, it really looked like a horror movie. These guys, some of them in flip flops, come running through. They just shoot down those techie cameras and they just clip with, practically with nail clippers through the fence. When you watch the footage, it's just horrifying. So we weren't protected, and no Israeli, I don't care if they hated Netanyahu, didn't hate Netanyahu. At that moment, it was shocking that we were so unprotected. And it was that part was the terrifying part. Oh my God, we were there, we were thinking that we were protected. And this trauma, the initial trauma for all Israelis was that.
Yeah.
We're always so sure of our security services, not just the army, right? There's the Mossad and the Shin Bet, and we have the police and that. One thing I will say, the who stepped up first and foremost and was amazingly brave right at the get-go were the police. All the Israel policemen in the south, near where this happened, miles around where it happened. These are guys, see, this was a Jewish holiday. It was Simchat Torah and it was Shabbat. And they
Right.
fell on the same day. And these guys were all at home, having holiday meals. Unfortunately, so were our heads of our security services. They were off having vacation with their families, okay?
Right.
But these policemen grabbed their weapons in shorts and flip-flops and went out. Many of them lost their lives killing terrorists on their own down the street. The bravery was amazing.
Yeah.
But anyway, the trauma was horrible, and I had never seen anything like that in terms of felt anything like that in terms of how insecure we all were,
Mhm.
and that there was no warning. And how was there no warning? I mean, we've had missiles, we were at the Gulf War, we had missiles from Iraq, we've had many, many things. But we were warned and we were told what to do in the event that ABC.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
No warning. So that was really, really awful. And we felt so vulnerable. And everybody thought, including those who supported Netanyahu, that he was toast because,
Yeah.
okay, Mr.
Sure.
Security, and he's the head of the government. What are you going to do? We were wrong. And thank God we were wrong because though it is true that he also didn't know, and by the way, in fairness to Netanyahu, that weekend nobody woke him up. Nobody told him that anything was going on. So, but it is true that prior to that, he was persuaded by all the security services that Hamas had been deterred.
Right.
But anyway, aside from whether you blame him or you don't blame him, what he did from that moment on, thank God he was the head of the country because there's nobody in Israel who could have maneuvered that with all the pressures, international, at the time it was the Biden administration, international pressure from the UN, anti Semitism breaking out all over the world. the protesters who aren't protesting now in the streets, but all hate him. Um, calling him Mussolini, Hitler, I don't know, whatever they called him through all those protesters. And
Mhm.
all those pressures from every direction, and yet fighting this war and basically winning it. It's true, it's not done, but I mean, the
Yes.
accomplishments have been amazing.
Yes. He absolutely um I personally think that he's the most important leader that has ever led Israel, including Ben Gurion. Like he turned Israel into a superpower, and I don't know that anybody else could have executed this war. I do want to get back to Bibi at the very end, but just in the effort to stay sort of on this topic, I do want to mention to anybody who doesn't know, Ron Gavili, who was the very last hostage, was one of these police officers that Ruthie was talking about, who not only jumped out of his bed, but jumped out with a massive shoulder injury. There's different reports on whether he had a broken this or dislocated that, or it doesn't matter. He was on medical leave and he went in and sacrificed his life. Ruthie, I'm wondering, how vulnerable did you feel in Tel Aviv? Like you're seeing this, people don't always realize just how teeny tiny Israel really is. But at the same time, I think of it like Los Angeles, like you go south of Wilshire and you're in a whole different neighborhood than when you are north of Wilshire. And we're talking about like a street. So you're 10 miles, maybe, I mean, close to, how vulnerable did you feel or scared in Tel Aviv?
Well, a Hamas rocket hit the building next door to me, and all my windows were exploded. So that's how vulnerable
On
I felt.
October 7th?
The evening of, yeah, hours
Oh.
after October 7th happened. It started at 6:30 a.m. when we had sirens in Tel Aviv as
Mm-hmm.
well.
Mm-hmm.
And then that evening, I would say, I think it was about 8 or 9 p.m., a rocket hit the building next door and my entire street, not and in my apartment too, and the staircase where I was supposed to go in the event of a siren because I didn't have a bomb shelter room in my apartment. All the windows in the staircase exploded. I mean, exploded.
Yeah,
The blast broke
sure.
the window, but not only in my apartment, inside my apartment, but the staircase, but the whole street, blocks of this main street, all the storefront windows the street was filled with shards of glass. Just try to imagine, you know what it's like when you break a glass in your kitchen of a certain kind that it just
Mhm.
shatters into a million pieces, and you can sometimes end up finding pieces of glass like years later under your fridge or something. Imagine about, I would say, like half a mile of the street with all the store windows shattered all over the street.
I did not know that any Hamas missiles actually hit Tel Aviv. It wasn't
Oh, yeah.
shrapnel after an Iron Dome interception.
No, this
Wow.
wasn't shrapnel. This was an actual rocket that hit the
Okay.
roof of the building next door to me. And thank God nobody was in the apartment at that time, in that apartment, because it was
Okay.
demolished.
Oh,
And the
wow.
rockets that hit, it's true, the Iron Dome caught most of them. We also had drones. Listen, near my apartment, 2 blocks away, a Houthi drone smashed
Yeah.
into a building right near my apartment. Also, Tel Aviv was definitely a danger zone, and especially when Iran, during the Iran attacks. But I mean, if you
Yeah.
walk through Tel Aviv, a lot of the stuff hasn't been repaired yet. Not
Yeah.
all of it, but I'm saying there are buildings that were so damaged that it's going to take a while to fix them.
Yeah.
In my case, in my apartment, okay, the glazier came and fixed the panes of glass and the
Yeah.
street. They cleaned up the street, but there's still tons of damage around Tel Aviv.
Yeah. I have a friend also closer to Jaffa, but who had the same thing happen, meaning that a neighbor was hit and her windows blew out. And yeah, that's absolutely terrifying. So I just want to ask before getting more into the war, going back to just you and in your personal leanings, because this has been such a topic of conversation since the war, as far as all of Israel sort of like moved to the right. I would say diasporic Jews who support Israel also took that huge leap. But I'm wondering, as a self-described right-wing bohemian, did October 7th push you further right than you were before, or you've always sort of been in the same place?
Oh, totally in the same place. And I got to tell you, one of the things that really got on my nerves during again, among American Jews and Israeli Jews too, is the following. When they said things like, we all thought that Hamas was deterred. We all thought, I said, I never did.
Right.
No, I'm sorry. No, no, not true. Second, guess who never did? Ben Gvir and Smotrich. And I tell that to American Jews when I see them. I know you all think they're the bogeymen, right? And you say, how come? And then we need an investigation into how we thought this, we were so wrong. And I said, guess who the people who were not wrong about it? And you guys go after them all the time, attacking them. Did you ever once say, hey, they were right?
Mm-hmm.
No, you say they're crazy, messianics, and all that. Anyway, no, my politics didn't change in the least bit.
Okay.
Um, but I was shocked, more than I was shocked by the brutality of those barbarians, because as I said, we saw it in spurts all the time. It's just the shock was the amount, the volume of it. What shocked me was the explosion of anti-Semitism um, that this unleashed, rather than an explosion of sympathy for Israel, it unleashed anti-Semitism around the world and in places you would never expect throughout the United States, college campuses, that it wasn't just, the Palestinians. This was like, it's become real Jew hatred, swastikas on college campuses. I'm sorry, it's like it had the opposite effect of the post-Holocaust, which was, there was an anti-Semitism taboo. October 7th was like, okay, everybody, here's your license
Yeah.
to just drink the blood of all the people. Now just let it rip.
Yeah.
That
I
bothers me.
yeah, I have to say that as I watched the first of the university professors, who was Russell Rickford, from my alma mater, from Cornell, express his exhilaration over the massacres all over the internet. I have to be honest, I assumed that was a demented aberration that would quickly be condemned and put down. I mean, boy, was I wrong. Like, how long after October 7th was it when you realized that the the terrorist sympathizers in the anti-Semites weren't just out there taking advantage of a situation, but that it was about to go mainstream?
Well, I'll tell you, as I said, I was totally shocked.
Yeah.
It didn't, after, I don't know, about a week or two or a month or two or something, I was no longer shocked. Okay.
Okay.
Because one of the things that we know about progressivism is that it's the worst hypocrisy on the planet, because progressives they go full circle and they support causes, they support people and groups that would kill them in 2 seconds. Like when you see the gay community supporting, a Palestinian this and blood Palestinian that, and those are people like, if those you have gay people going to Gaza, they'd be tarred and feathered and slaughtered. Okay, so it's like, are you kidding me? But the other hypocrisy that shouldn't have surprised us, it didn't surprise me, was how the women's movements and the UN, the women's committees in the UN, women all over the world said, no, there weren't really rapes on October 7th, or they shut up about it. They either said it
Mm-hmm.
didn't. Now, why shouldn't we be surprised? Because that kind of hypocrisy we saw during the time of Clinton, Monica Lewinsky, all the women who had said, anytime a man even compliments you for having looking nice in the office, should be slapped with a sexual harassment suit up. And suddenly, not Bill Clinton, and Monica Lewinsky was vilified, not Bill Clinton, by those same progressive women. I hate that word because they're
Yeah.
not progressive at
Regressive.
all.
Yes.
Yeah, regressive. And the same thing happened after October 7th. That women did not stand up
Yeah.
against this barbarism.
So there's this absolute hypocrisy, of course, like that's unquestionable and indisputable. But I think that God said his explanation or his terminology is so much more. I guess explains the phenomenon so much better when he calls it suicidal empathy. That the hypocrisy doesn't come from nowhere. It's look how good I am. Look at this virtue signal that I will root for the person who would kill me because I am such a good person. So,
Oh, exactly. But you see, it's not just that. A lot of those people don't really know, they don't grasp that they're rooting for the person who would kill them.
you think 2.5 years later, they still haven't gotten the message?
Look, I don't know. How is it that since the Holocaust, you still have Jews like, I don't know, Tom Friedman, you have Peter Beinart, you have Jews, American Jews,
Mhm.
who still, you can tell, they still feel that, like, if Hitler were alive today, he wouldn't want to put me in an oven because I'm one of the good guys or something. And they certainly don't seem to believe that about, the Palestinian, anybody, Hamas or any of those groups or whatever. The reason I think that they believe their lies is because, by the same token, the generals and all the security services and politicians who said, no, no, all we need to do is give Hamas work permits. The Palestinians, you know that when they are out of work, that will cause them to bubble up their society to bubble up, and then there's terrorism. And I kept saying, where do you people get that? Bin Laden was like educated and wealthy. We have known now for ages that terrorism is not caused by financial desperation. Okay, usually, by the way, when you're financially desperate and you're really poor and you're actually demoralized. You're not energized to go out and kill. Not
Yeah.
really. I mean, obviously, if you're mentally ill or something, but I'm talking about as a society. No, that isn't, you do not get energized. You get demoralized when you're downtrodden. Anyway, so as I said, these are people, Israelis, who were saying, no, no, we just need. Now, if you were to ask the people who believed that, like Benny Gantz, who at the time when he was defense minister and he was saying we have to, and I don't know, also these heads of the army were saying, no, no, we need to give them more work permits. We need to keep them from getting angry or whatever it is. Um, I remember thinking, where the hell do you get that idea? What is the matter with you? But they believed it. Here, I will not say that they were being hypocritical. Okay, I think they were delusional,
Yeah.
and I think they're living in La La Land, and that they don't know their history or whatever it is. Or it's some kind of Stockholm syndrome. I don't know. There are many explanations, but I don't think they were. I think they genuinely believed
Yeah.
the baloney that they
I, th-
were trying to
I
feed everybody else.
I think it's the inaccurate projection that everybody shares the same values that we do. I mean, let's think about a few things. When Israel unilaterally withdrew from Gaza, I mean, okay, first of all, they gave Gaza a de facto state, right? So if that were the thing, if that were the thing that they wanted, they got it, and they decided, no, this will be a good time to fight more. Second, Israel left the infrastructure. They left the greenhouses that in spite the Palestinians thought would be a good idea, that instead of having an agricultural economy, why don't we destroy these to show Israel just how much we hate them? And why don't we dig up the water pipes and turn them into missiles, and let's tear down the buildings and use the concrete and the electricity to build tunnels. And we're talking about a welfare economy like no other. Hamas said out loud at the time, it's not our job to take care of our people. Yes, they are the governing body. That's the world's job. And so economy is not and never has been a priority. And this is why the whole Mirror Gaza thing, like, unless it has nothing to do with the Gazans, like, they don't care about money. They care about being martyrs. That's what they care about. They care about destroying Israel. That's what they care about. They will hide guns under their children's beds and dig tunnels there just for the sake of the cause. And everything that Israel has done to build the economy of Gaza has been deliberately destroyed by them. And also, it feeds into the narrative. Like, these are the poor Palestinians. If we have nothing, then we get the world's sympathy. It's just such a propaganda machine beyond that somebody like Benny Gantz could fall for that. I mean, there's no other word for it. We see the playbook. We've read it over and over again. And people just don't seem to get it. These people are not like us. And when I say us, I mean the whole Western world.
No, that's absolutely true. And you'd think that Israelis would at least grasp it, and by the way, a lot of Middle Eastern experts, not in the progressive Middle East studies departments of universities, but real Middle East experts who really speak Arabic and other languages in the Middle East, like Farsi, they all say that. They say, no, you don't, you are actually, in a way, it's really patronistic. It's like
Yeah.
you are, or paternalistic, I mean to say, patronizing. To think, oh, these people, they don't really know. Everybody just wants
Yeah.
affluence and everything. As opposed to saying, no, no, these are people with genuine culture, genuine religious ideology. And by saying no, 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 you're actually putting them down. And by the way, the founding fathers of Israel, there was that fight among them as well.
Mm-hmm.
Jabotinsky said, no, we're going to go, Jews will go to Palestine, in the pre-state, the mandatory Palestine. We're going to go there, and there are already people there. They're not going to like us, and so we have to go in with an iron fist. And once we show them that we're there to stay and we're the boss, etc., then we can ease up. Like a teacher on the first day of class, being tough.
Mm-hmm.
And the others, like Chaim Weizmann, the others said, no, no, we're going, we give them health care and everything, and then they'll like us. I mean, there was a huge split over, because I have to tell you, in my experience in Israel and elsewhere, growing up in America, the left were always the biggest racists. Um, because they were, as I said, patronizing, not at all seeing people of color as their equals. And that is where that comes from, saying, no, 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 they don't mean it. They don't mean it, or we'll show with our good graces, we can help them. And there, the right is not racist. The right says, no, no. They are my equals, and if they're my enemies, I want to kill them. If we make sure that if they don't want to kill me, or if I make it clear to them that they'd better not, that is actually respect for
Yeah.
one's enemy. Respect to say, I believe what you're telling me.
Yeah. I'm curious, Ruthie, because I grapple with this almost every day. It's a very, I guess, sort of thorny question. But which shocked and horrified you more, the atrocities of October 7th or the world's response to them? Because honestly, like, there's nothing more horrifying that happened on October than what happened on October 7th. But what's happening in the world today, and like you said, the fact that it's happening in response to the Jews being massacred, my head spins. Which do you think is the more shocking of the two?
Well, obviously the slaughter and I won't even mention some of the atrocities that you can't
Yeah.
wrap your head
Yeah.
around. A lot of people don't believe it, and there are more and more details coming out. At the time, there also were, but I mean, since then, even more. And they really are worse than a horror movie. So, in that sense, that's the most shocking, because these are human beings whose lives were demolished, and they were assaulted, abused, their body, their corpses were abused. I mean, in the most horrific ways.
Yes.
But the shock of the response, the anti-Semitic response, was really horrible, but it's a slightly different kind. Having said that, we are
Yeah.
seeing that violence erupting. It's not just, it's not just in the pages of newspapers or in classes in universities or drawing swastikas or Palestinian flags or from the river to the sea. It is also, there's a lot of violence going on. We see that in Brooklyn, New York. We've seen it in LA. We certainly see it in Europe, in European cities.
Yeah.
Serious violence against people who are visibly Jewish, which is why it usually happens to Orthodox Jews who are
Yeah.
either wearing a kippah or they're anything visible. Because you and I could, we certainly look Jewish, but we could also be Italian, or we could.
Sure.
It's not obviously Jewish. Of course, I wear a Star of David,
Yeah.
but I'm saying people
Sure.
walking down the street who are visibly Jewish are targets of physical violence all over the world now.
Yeah. No, what I meant by shocked, I don't mean to compare the two. What I mean was, which would you expect less? Which one just came, like, where on earth did this come from? You know?
Well, as I said, the first shock was that we weren't prepared. I was not at all
Yeah.
shocked. The level of the level of cruelty and sadism on the part of Hamas, that didn't shock me because I knew they were like that.
Yeah.
Okay, that I knew. As I said, I didn't expect the scope and all that. But I certainly knew they were like that, and I knew that they would be happy to do that. And I've seen them do it on individual and also on other. With that, I wasn't surprised by.
Okay.
But yes, and I have to say, I shouldn't not by now shouldn't have been surprised by the explosion of anti-Semitism. And while we're on that subject,
Yeah.
one more person who says to me that is anti-Semitic explosion, anti-Semitism explosion is because Israel doesn't have good enough hasbara or PR. My head is gonna explode.
Let's talk about that for a second, actually. I actually 100% agree with you. So this Hasbara, so Hasbara, for anyone who doesn't know, like what it really means is basically to explain. Is that accurate, Ruthie? If I were to translate it?
And so some people translate it as propaganda, which it's not. And some people explain it as PR. Okay, it's like your
Right.
PR.
But it
And
literally,
has from
but
the root, yes, to
it
explain.
literally means to
That
explain, right?
means, let me explain to you why you're wrong, why we're really not bad guys. Let me explain to you why we're not evil occupiers, why we're not committing genocide, that we don't drink the blood of babies for our matzah. The point is this: Israel has always been saying, let me ask you something.
Right.
Have you ever heard somebody say to Zelensky in Ukraine or Putin in Russia, the problem with you guys is you just don't have good enough PR. Israel is the only country whose supporters say this is a problem because you're not explaining yourselves well enough. Jews say that all the time. I'm Israel's enemies. They don't want us to explain ourselves. They say, of course you can't
Yeah.
because you're guilty. I'm talking about Israel's supporters.
Sure.
And I want to say, excuse me, screw you. Okay, you're sitting in New York telling me that we're not, because we're embarrassing you. What? Because the world hates us, and just they hate you because you're a Jew. And don't tell me it's because Israel didn't explain well enough. I
Yeah.
don't buy it. Yes, I know. And the army, one of the reasons is because the enemies lie and Israel tries to tell the truth. When I say tries, so some event happened in Gaza and the army would say, wait a minute, we have to look into it.
Yeah.
We have to see if we shot that fire that killed so and so. By the time the lie has spread all around the world, then the army comes back and says, "No, we found out that in fact it was an Islamic Jihad rocket that hit that hospital, not the IDF." By that time, it's too late. But excuse me, so what are we? But if you say, "No, let's just go on and lie because we don't know what happened," no, we're not going to do that. Okay, because we're not barbaric animals. So yes, so in other words, we lose the PR war, but as I said, this is a PR problem. Give me a break.
Yeah. It's funny how basically the enemy at the gate, every time they find out a word, right? So Hasbara was the word they never heard before this war, and that then they weaponized it and turned it into, like you say, propaganda, when really every country on earth has a PR machine. And so it's really, again, it just comes back to double standards. If there were a Hebrew word, like, it's just like, this is pretty funny. In the early days of this war, got kicked off of Instagram. I reinstated it, but for calling myself a Zionist. Because they said, well, Zionist is on our list of words that you're not allowed to use. Now that, boy, do I have problems with Meta, but that was a well-intentioned, like, they're like, oh, people are weaponizing, and they're like, they literally took, just like they took the word Palestine, they're like, let's take the words and turn them into something else. And the thing about Hasbara, and this is a big debate now too, and I have to say I do bristle when people, for example, keep posting these anti-Semitic things over and over and over again, because then the algorithm says, let's show more of it, and then the haters are happy because they get more of it, and the people who are on the fence are like, oh, well, this must be the thing. But if we don't explain, if we don't have a offensive and a defensive PR strategy, then those lies are just going to go completely unchecked. And so it's like, it's hard to fight. It's easy to fight truth. It's easy to fight facts versus facts and opinions on facts, but it's very hard to fight downright lies.
Oh, absolutely. And that's why all the people who are pro-Israel, who have been really amazing about making Israel's case all over social and also in the mainstream media, and we have great people doing that. And they should and they do, and they're great. What I meant is, like, this idea that somehow the Israeli government doesn't invest enough money in its PR campaign. No, I'd rather have, excuse me, Ben Shapiro or Douglas Murray, or I can name you a million other people. They're doing that not because the Israeli government paid them. They're doing it because they are knowledgeable, and they know history, and they know contemporary history, and they know ancient history, and they are. And then we have, Richard Kemp. We have military experts defending Israel, and John Spencer, etc.
And
As I
Andrew
said,
Fox.
and Andrew Fox. I'm saying that this idea that somehow it's got, again, this nanny state thing. Well, why isn't the Israeli government? No, I'm sorry. People in the know are doing it. Of course, they're fighting an uphill battle because, as you said, lies are harder to refute. But let's take the most recent example, Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson was saying that Israel abuses Christians, and anyway, he said that Christian Zionists are evil. And he was attacking Ambassador Mike Huckabee, U.S. Ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, repeatedly on social media and on his own show and everything. So Huckabee decided once, so Huckabee wrote on X and said, hey, Tucker, listen, I've known you for years. I don't know what happened to you, but you're wrong and all that stuff. And finally, Huckabee said, hey, instead of talking about me, why don't you talk to me? Why don't you have me on your show? So Tucker said, okay. And yesterday, Tucker arrived in a private plane. I wonder who must have funded that. Okay, so Tucker arrived with Neil Patel and, camera people, I guess, soundmen, on a private plane and landed at Ben Gurion Airport at the VIP lounge with all the goodies and all that, VIP lounge. And he waited there. He wouldn't come to it. He wouldn't come into Israel. He stayed there 3 hours. He and Ambassador Huckabee went to Ben Gurion Airport and sat with him for a couple of hours, did the interview, and then Tucker went back on his private plane and went back to the U.S. And then he said, but what did he do? He told the Daily Mail, he said, I was detained at Ben Gurion Airport. They questioned us, they interrogated us, and all this. It was a big fat lie. First of all, they got VIP treatment. Second of all Israeli security, they do it to everybody, including to me. You land there, they check your passport. They said, what was the purpose of your visit? I mean, not me, I'm a citizen, but when I wasn't, and I know anybody who comes to Israel, they'll say, what's the purpose of your visit? By the way, which they say to me when I go to the United States, the guy at passport control. So here, because it's a VIP lounge, they get VIP treatment. So the security people come to them. They don't have to stand in line, hand their passport to some window and get people. So they came to them and said, so what were you doing here? And they said, I'm interviewing Ambassador Huckabee. And they said, what was the interview about? I mean, that was the extent of before they stamped their passport and they went back home. Now, if you look online, there are a lot of people defending Huckabee and saying Tucker has gone crazy and he hates Israel, blah, blah, blah. And then you see Tucker supporters. We know Tucker's right. Israel abuses people. Israel hates Christians. Israel hates this. So what are you going to do? We know it's a lie. Tucker's fans, they don't care, or they think it's a lie. I don't know. They don't care. So
Right.
you tell me how the Israeli government is supposed to, what hasbara or PR can refute that? No, it's just everybody, when all people who've been to Israel gave a story online about his own experience, and Ambassador Huckabee answered, and former U.S. ambassador to Israel, David Friedman, weighed in. Okay, is that going to change anybody's mind? Any of those anti-Semites' minds?
Yeah.
No, it's not.
Yeah. I think that Greta Thunberg is his advisor on
Yeah,
how to deal. And the funny thing is that if he just, I think that a lot of these people are afraid to go to Israel because they know that if they walk into Israel and they walk around Israel, they'll know that everything they said was a lie and they have no more
yeah,
plausible deniability. I mean, everybody who goes to Israel comes back understanding there is no apartheid, that these are beautiful, peace-loving people, that this is a Western nation, they're everything that is said about Israel is a lie. And I think people we see this also in the U.S. Congress, that certain people like the members of the squad refuse to go to Israel because it's just gonna be propaganda and Hasbro or whatever. It's like, well, why don't you just look at all the things that you claim that are completely false? So before we move on from the anti-Semitism conversation, because I do think this is, I mean, extraordinarily important, especially in the diaspora. It's something that touches us very, very profoundly. First, I just want to ask you, which term do you feel is more accurate, anti-Semitism or Jew hatred? Which one do you prefer?
well, Jew hatred says it better because, anti-Semitism is a little bit more laundered, I mean,
Mm.
it's more, I don't know, you could say it's more pristine, or more like a dictionary definition. And Jew hatred is like, this is what it is.
Yeah.
However, I would say that a lot of people say, no, no, I don't hate Jews. Like Mamdani, the mayor of New York, would tell you, I don't hate Jews. The second part of that sentence would be, I love Jews like Peter Beinart. I love the Jews who voted for me. I like Jews who are progressive, blah blah
Yeah.
whatever, and hate. I love anti-Israel Jews. So he might even be telling you the truth if he said, I don't hate Jews. All right, that might even be accurate to some extent. So some people will say, no, I got lots of friends who are Jews, and they mean it. Okay, because the Jews are on their side, so they mean it. And so, in that sense, Jew hatred is not always as accurate,
Yeah.
but because of the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, which says that singling out Israel, double standards against Israel, does constitute
Right.
anti-Semitism. In that sense, it is true that anti-Semitism better describes, hatred of Israel, not just Jews. It's like the collective Jew, or singling out Israel for attack, is constitutes anti-Semitism. So I would say it depends on the context in
Yes.
which you're using the word.
Do you think that the anti-Semitism or Jew hatred that we're seeing today is as bad as the Nazi era, or possibly even worse due to its global scope?
It's a good question. I think that it's really hard to answer that unless you lived through the Nazi era
Yeah.
prior to the Holocaust, in the lead up, okay? Because if you're asking me, have we hit that point? No. American Jews aren't being marched and put in cattle cars and marched to ovens, nor are European Jews. Okay?
Hold on. I'm not comparing. I'm not comparing the moment to the Holocaust. I'm comparing the environment. I'm comparing the rhetoric, the yeah, just that the scope, like maybe I'm wrong. I feel like um, the the broad sense of what was going on with the Jew hatred before World War II was predominantly limited to, I won't say Germany, let's say Europe. I'm not saying there wasn't a massive rally in Madison Square Garden, but it wasn't as institutionalized. I mean, now we're seeing, last week, a Holocaust survivor kicked out of a museum in Spain because her presence was offending people. We're hearing about this in Japan, and we're hearing about this, in places that obviously what happened at Bondi Beach. I mean, so I really am wondering if we're seeing so much of the same rhetoric. It's so much the same behaviors, but we're seeing on really, I think, a much larger scale, and people are not grasping that.
Definitely. The atmosphere is similar, I would say, except as you said, it's less institutionalized. So on Bondi
Yeah.
Beach, if you give as an example, even though the Australian Prime Minister is, as far as I'm concerned, a vile human being and all that, and he's anti-Israel, and I can't stand him. But having said that, it's not he who said, let me send my police force to kill Jews. Okay. This isn't institutionalized to that extent. The other difference is, and this is a problem because
Mm-hmm.
a lot of these people, the atmosphere is, no, it's not against Jews, it's against Israel that's killing, because Israel is the Nazis. We are defending good people against evil Israelis, and they take it out on Jews wherever they are. Yes, the atmosphere is horrific, and it's especially horrific in the academia, places where it should never, darken those doors ever. So yes, it's extremely dangerous. But having said that, if you look at world leaders who are winning, if you look at Donald Trump, it's true that there is a wing of the MAGA movement that is, hates Israel and hates, like Tucker Carlson. But Trump is not in that movement, and neither is Marco Rubio and other. I mean, they're just not.
Yeah.
And so what you have pushback from authorities against that. And not only that, you have the White House saying we're going to defund, we're not going to give federal funding to universities who promote this. That's the difference. You could say that to the rise of the Nazis, that could change, obviously. And one of the differences, again, is that when Hitler came to power, there was no Israel. And
Right.
today, you could say the Jewish people, we have an army, we're in a different situation. Having said that, that's what we used to say. And then October 7th happened. It's like we're now armed, no longer can anybody do that stuff to us, never again. And then lo and behold, October 7th happened.
Mhm.
And if Hezbollah had joined in that day,
Yeah.
if from the north,
Yeah.
we would have been so screwed because we could barely get enough forces into to fight Hamas. It would have been, I can't even imagine what would have happened. So
Yeah.
that was, I don't know, by the grace of God, maybe literally. And so I'm saying on the one hand we say no, the difference is the Jews now we have our own state and we have our own army, and we
Mhm.
can protect ourselves or defend ourselves. And then when October 7th happened, that's what I mean by the trauma. It was like, oh my God, maybe we can't defend ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah, no, when I talk about the climate, I'm really talking about a populist rather than an
Yes,
institutionalized
no, that's
climate.
true. Yes, yes,
Yeah. But I
yes.
also, I guess, like, I don't guess. A huge concern of mine is, especially seeing this horseshoeing that between the right and the left, that the one thing that they share in common, I would call it the far right and the most of the left. I mean,
Yes.
I say it's more like a P, because here's the left and the far right, only the far
That's
right
right.
hits, but it hits so much of the left continues to be in that camp. I'm concerned, especially with their control over our education, given the political polarization of the world today, combined with the force multipliers of the internet and, of course, AI, not to mention the bot farms. I'm really curious, and I know this is going to sound like very fatalistic, but do you think that anti-Semitism this sounds so fatalistic, will ever wane again? And if so, when or under what circumstances?
Oh, it might go into hiding again. I mean, after the Holocaust, there was a taboo on public expressions of anti-Semitism. There was a lot of pity, people love dead Jews, if you know what I mean, as Dara Horn said in the title of her book. We but will it ever go away? I don't know. I find it hard to believe because it's the oldest hatred and it never really goes away. It just is sort of surprising. And one of the things that is known about it is a society that harbors anti-Semitism or in which it's allowed to fester is a society in decline. So, and we saw that in Europe, we know Europe, I don't know what's going to happen over there because Europe has a big demography problem, serious demography problem,
Mhm.
and also both economically and all of those things. And so Europe is already declining. Its birth rates
Yeah.
are appalling, except for immigration. Immigrants are having a lot of children and Europeans are not and all that. So, but that is known. The society that hates its Jews is already in decline. It's both a reflection of what's going on, and it also is a harbinger of what's going on. It's both. It's
Yeah.
like a mixture.
Yeah.
And I don't think the United States has hit that point. I think Europe is closer to it. I don't think the United States has. And I mean, especially because of the current administration. I don't know what would have happened if Kamala Harris had won that election and then that encouragement or her anti-Israel, she was openly anti-Israel, and whether she would have been part of the squad, we don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know now, and it could happen again. So if you're asking though, like, will it ever just go back to sleep? I guess when a society wants to heal, it better go back to sleep. It had better,
Uh,
because
yeah. Okay. So let me ask sort of a clarifying question, because I alluded to the AI and the internet. And so let me ask you this. What do you feel was actually the primary goal of October 7th? Like, do you think that it was to kill as many Israelis as possible? Or do you think, because this is what I think, that it was to launch a delegitimization campaign that has been decades in the works and finally hit the slipstream? Because with the internet, there's no turning back. And if it is the latter rather than the former, meaning delegitimization was always the goal, the internet is there forever. And what we're seeing is that since the ceasefire, the rhetoric is not dying down. In fact, I'll argue it's ramping up. To me, this is the war, was the war, and I don't know how we turn back from here.
well, you're right, but I have to say there was a more literal goal. You're right, it's absolutely true, the delegitimization, but that was already going on. By the way, I mean the UN, the international community, so-called, uh, there was already a real delegitimization campaign. You had more and more voices saying that Israel was a failed experiment or that it has no right to exist and all that. But make no mistake, Hamas's goal was, even though you would say, well, really, how could they have destroyed Israel? They were just a bunch of terrorists, and as many as there were, they couldn't just totally destroy the country. But they were hoping Hezbollah was going to join in, and Iran and the Houthis all at once. I mean, their actual goal was to wipe out Israel. When the Islamic Republic, the goal of the mullahs, a stated goal is to annihilate Israel.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so when Hamas did that, it wasn't merely, oh, good, this is also to help delegitimize Israel. It was literally to start that annihilation war. And they hoped, as I said, their buddies,
Yeah.
their fellow jihadis, and their big patron saint in Tehran would all jump in at the same time. And then Israel, we might have been wiped out. I don't really have, I don't know. It's easy to say, I
Yeah.
don't know, but that was their actual goal,
Yeah.
right?
Okay. So, given the aftermath of the war in Gaza, we've all seen the pictures, the images, the videos, many of them fake, but some of them very real. Would you say that the IDF is the most moral army on earth?
Oh, absolutely, and I know it. And I tell you something, every one of my 4 kids before he and she went into the army, I had to give them, and they're old now. Okay, I mean, when they were all 18, one after the other, after high school, boom, go to the army. Had to give them the same lecture. Don't, because at that time, and I would say still, they practically had to go into the army with a law book in their hands. I mean, not literally, okay, but almost. I would say to them, listen, I'd rather visit you in prison than in a graveyard. Because the purity of arms rules here are so insane. By the way, a guy named Asa Kasher, wrote the purity of arms, what you call the rules of engagement in war. He is such a far left, disgusting piece of garbage. And if you read those rules, he really is, and he's gotten worse and worse.
Right.
He used to be, no, he's just protecting Israel. Now he's just like openly disgusting. Those rules are not appropriate for an 18-year-old, 19-year-old who is going into battle against sadistic terrorists, okay?
Yeah.
They do follow the rules. And first of all, because we are a moral army. That isn't our goal, is to go in and commit atrocities. Okay, it isn't. It never was. You didn't, my feeling is you didn't need those rules of engagement. That's my feeling, because if you read them, they make total sense for any normal society and a normal army. They make sense. Yes, you don't go in to do anything. You don't go in to harm a civilian population. You do anything you can to avoid killing civilians, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, they did it anyway. The IDF has always done that. And by the way, if any soldiers stray from that, okay, it's not that there's no such thing as a bad apple in any army or bad apples. But the difference is, the question is, how are they treated? And in Israel, they're court-martialed, or they're punished. I mean, they have a trial, they're investigated, and they're punished. In our enemies' countries, they're hailed as heroes if they kill babies.
Yeah.
So they're,
And also the measures that Israel takes that no other country takes to avoid human casualties by whether it's dropping leaflets or literally calling and texting individual phones, by giving away the actual war plan, which is not a winning strategy for winning a war, but the lengths that Israel goes to, it's absolute ludicrousy that people would anything but hail them for their efforts to save lives. I mean, the civilian to I don't even know what to call them, because they're not soldiers, but combatant casualty rate, especially in the most intricate urban environment ever seen in warfare. The fact that it has defied all odds and been the lowest of any, I mean, we'll say modern war, but when we say modern, we're talking about
especially
an urban warfare ever. Yes, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, I don't see how anybody could, with a straight face, say otherwise. But I do want to ask you, Ruthie, and this is a tough question because you are like me. We are the girl hawks with the man doves. I mean, I don't know that Mark and Andrew are actually doves, but we are definitely hawks in their next to them. But it is hard sometimes to self-reflect. If you were in charge, how would this war, if at all, have been executed differently?
I really can't say it's. I don't like to be a backseat driver about the how a war was conducted. I'm the last person in the world who could say that, and I think we did the best we could, etc. There are times when, yes, I would have been way more extreme and less sympathetic to the enemy, definitely. I can tell you, prior to the war and the lead up to the war, there were a lot of, every week there were Gaza residents coming to the fence, the border fence, throwing incendiary balloons over. There were all kinds of firecrackers and shooting and weapons, all kinds of stuff like that. And I would have said, shoot to kill them. But not only our Supreme Court, but our thing was, yeah, well, they're a bunch of teenagers and they're only balloons and they're only this. They're only setting fire to some of the trees when the balloons go off. My feeling is, and I'm not kidding, okay, yeah, maybe they were 16. Yeah, there were a lot of 16-year-olds that committed
Yeah.
atrocities on October 7th as well. I'm, I'm sorry. Okay, you do that. I think we should have shot to kill and say nobody comes near that border fence. But we just let it happen. And it turns out this was part of their testing us, like the frog in the boiling water. It's just, we'll just keep doing it. We'll keep protesting on
Yeah.
Friday. We'll keep doing it. We'll do a little this and a little that and a little, it'll lull us to sleep. And when the girls who were field observers were warning weeks and months in advance of October 7th, Hamas is training. They're there. They have these setups. They're training and they're training for war. And they were told, yeah, yeah, they always do that. They always do that. Shut up. If stop bothering us. Their commanders were telling them
Yeah.
to the point where, I mean, so I'm saying, yes, when you ask me what I would have done differently, would have been prior to that and now. But again, oh, we spend so much time telling the Hamas, you can come to our courts and complain.
Yeah.
I'm just speaking of judicial reform. I'm saying, yes, I think we need to more shoot to kill anybody who is in a slightest bit endangering us for, those nationalist motives or religious motives.
I do think that the D is coming out of the IDF, and that we finally woke up. That it's time to go on the offensive. How soon do you think it will be before war in Gaza in the red zone, the 47% that Hamas is still controlling? How long do you think it's going to be before that reignites? Will it wait until after Iran, or we have this 1 or 2 month window? I mean, things keep changing because it's like, oh, we'll give you 2 months starting.
Yeah,
When?
Hamas never
I mean,
agreed. The point is, Hamas is
yeah.
lying. Hamas never agreed to the ceasefire. Hamas. Okay. So here's the thing. The irony is that right now and today, as you and I said right before the broadcast, that President Trump was giving a speech at the board opening of the Board of Peace for Gaza, which is a joke. I'm sorry to say. I know he has good intentions, okay? Peace is the last thing. I mean, unless, again, there certain conditions have to be met. Hamas has not been disarmed. It will not disarm, whatever. We are going to have to, yes, Israel's going to have another military operation. When, I don't know. But yes, Iran right now is the key threat. And we're all sitting here waiting to be told when we got to be near our bomb shelters because of an imminent attack on Iran. And by the way, you should know, most Israelis are hoping for that. Yes,
Yes,
because we got to deal with that threat.
100%. We are going to get into Iran. I do want to wind up this war, so to speak. When Israel goes back in, not if, because everybody, I haven't heard a single expert who has thought that anyone other than Israel could ever disarm Hamas. Can Israel realistically disarm Hamas?
Well, that's a good question because I mean, Israel hasn't been able to disarm the terrorists in Judea and Samaria, which some people call the West Bank, but I don't call it that. Listen, going door to door, get every kind of firearm, every weapon, every this, it's really, really hard. And it's especially hard. More than that, let me tell you, maybe you don't realize how many that we destroyed 150 kilometers of tunnels. There are another 400 kilometers left there. And that is the length of the state of Israel, by the way, from Metula to Eilat, from the
Yeah.
tip to the southern tip is about 400 kilometers, thereabouts. That's how much tunnel space there is. So when you ask me, can we disarm them? Not if and they're smuggling weapons in there. And up until very recently, and Egypt, we got to really watch it because through Egypt they were getting smuggled
Yeah.
weapons and all that. So I put little faith in this Board of Peace, but especially since the member participants, many of them are very bad actors, and
Yeah.
what can I say?
When you say that there are 400 kilometers left, or is that within the red zone, or is there still known tunnels?
Yeah, no, some of it, as far as I know, that's all. Now, this actually
Yeah.
could. I could be mistaken.
Yeah.
As far as I understand, most of that is on the Hamas-controlled side. The
Okay.
40% Hamas still
Okay.
controlled. The reason I think that it's whether I read it or I heard it, or I'm assuming it because if it were on the other side, the Israel-controlled side, we'd already be able to be blowing them up. But it's not that simple. As I said, they have to be detected.
Yeah.
A lot of this stuff is still being discovered. It's not
It,
that, okay, here's the map, like the New York City subway system.
right.
Okay, here's the
Right.
map. Okay, go do it, guys. No, we keep discovering more shafts that lead to another tunnel, that lead to another tunnel. So, I mean,
There are still terrorists coming out of the tunnels
right,
in the 53% that's being controlled by Israel. So I'm
right.
wondering if Israel is holding back on destroying tunnels where they know there's people in them, or if they just don't know where the tunnels are, or if it's logistically just such a tremendous challenge to. But it just seems to me like just keep pouring concrete in.
Yeah, well,
Seal
no,
the
I
top.
know. It does seem logical. Here's the thing, especially since all the hostages are out. There was
Yeah,
a time when
exactly.
we can't pour concrete, we can't
That's
do that
right.
to go through the tunnels because we have hostages in there. But I think, I don't know the answer to that either. It could
Yeah.
be that Israel promised the Trump administration that we would do this and that. But
Uh,
one thing the Trump administration has not prevented Israel from doing at all is killing every terrorist that pops up out of those tunnels. It's like
yeah.
whack-a-mole.
Yes.
This one, kill
Literally.
him. In Hezbollah and Lebanon, the same thing. The Trump administration has not said, whoa, whoa, guys, this is a ceasefire, don't do it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank God, because the Biden administration did and would have done it, or Kamala Harris. My point is, at the moment, the one thing at least we're not being criticized for in Washington, and by the way, that's the only thing that counts where Israel's concerned is Washington.
Yeah.
And with all due respect to London and Paris and yeah, Ottawa, especially Ottawa. Washington is what counts for
Yeah.
Israel.
Of
And
course.
at the moment, we're on the same page totally about that. And that at least nobody is saying, you can't shoot those Hezbollah terrorists emerging and that. No. So that's what I know.
How does this war end?
Well, my belief is that there has to be a real war against Iran first. I mean,
Yeah.
again, Gaza is such a long-standing problem, and especially now with the Board of Peace. And again, we can't just go and carpet bomb the area, which we never would do anyway. Okay, as much as, after October 7th, you could have heard me scream, carpet bomb that goddamn thing.
Right.
But, that was my emotion you talk, and I didn't
Right.
think we would do it, and it's not even that I believe you should do it. Really. I mean, only when, you know how it is when you get emotional, when something really bad happens. And that happens to me, by the way, if I watch the news and I hear about a sadistic serial killer, it has nothing to do with Israel or anything else, I also feel that way. Just kill the guy.
Yeah.
Uh, so I don't know how it ends, but I know that we've got to take care of Iran, and I think it's imminent. I mean, we all believe it is. I mean, I hope it isn't.
Sure.
That that isn't going to. That's not going to make a dent on the Board of Peace, not Board of Peace, but that has to be taken care of.
100%. We are, I sorry to keep saying this. We are going to get to, I have a few more questions. Netanyahu has assured Israel that they won't, but in your opinion, will Gaza ever again present a threat to Israel?
It's those big promises. I'd like to believe him.
Okay.
It's hard for me to believe it. It's like you're asking me, will, anti-Semitism go back, crawl back under the rock when it came out? I find it hard to believe. Like my cynicism comes from experience, not just living in Israel. Also, history. But
Yeah.
even if you love history books and all that, I'm talking about living in Israel. And as I would, I'm careful to say that it'll never pose a threat again. The only way it wouldn't pose a threat in the way that we mean is if Jews are allowed to settle there again and all that. And that's not happening anytime soon either. But, ideally, it would be because if there's any semblance of, let's say, non-belligerent, I would like to say peace, okay,
Hmm.
non-belligerent, there should be no reason that Jews
Right.
can't also live in Gaza.
Of
Excuse
course.
me, why not? How come only Jews are not allowed to do stuff in Israel? Arabs are allowed to live in Israel. This is allowed. Only Jews are not. And I disagree with that policy. Okay, I say, well, if Jews are not allowed to live somewhere, what is that somewhere? What does that tell you? Okay, that tells you that that is an enemy territory of an enemy of the West as well. What do you mean Jews can't live there? Now, as a Jew, I at this moment would not want to live in Gaza. But my point is, if you really mean, if President Trump really believes that peace is busting out all over, one condition is that you can't
Yeah,
forbid people from living there because they're Jews.
that's right. Well,
Okay,
there's no other group on earth that's told anywhere on earth that they can't live. I mean, there's so many places on earth where a Jew is not allowed to live, and this is accepted as
right?
normal. I actually addressed this in my conversation on here on the Yoga of War when I talked about like the settlement issue. That people just accept again these double standards. Could you imagine anywhere on earth where the United Nations, and let me just say, I'm not necessarily even talking about the body, but let's just say the United Nations of the world agree that Jews
Yeah.
should not be able to live in X, Y, and Z areas. Like, could you imagine if they were like, Christians cannot live in X, Y, and Z, or Muslims can't live in X, Y, and Z? The double standards, they really never end. So yeah, so as we wind down this talk on the war, I do want to talk also about the hostages for a moment, because obviously they were such an important part of this war. For some of us, the most important part. So I mean, so thank God, in like you said, maybe possibly like really divine intervention. Israel did and thanks to Trump, thank God in Trump, and Bibi. I hate that Bibi keeps getting cut out of this equation. None of this would have occurred without him, and he deserves all the credit. But Israel did do the seemingly impossible, right? We got all the hostages home, but the trade-offs were tough, thanks largely to the very dangerous precedent, right, that was set in the Gilad Shalit deal in 2011, when, for anyone who doesn't know, 1,027 terrorists, including Yahya Sinwar, were released in exchange for one Israeli soldier.
Yeah.
Thank God he's alive and well today. And so it's, do you say, was it worth it? So his life, you could argue, was traded for everyone who was killed in and since 10/7, for example. But given Israel's moral commitment to never abandon one of its own, and quite honestly, the Talmudic commandment to free the captives, what do you think Israel's hostage policy should be forthgoing?
First of all, this brings us to the question of the death penalty for terrorists.
That was my
Um,
next question.
no, and it's
Yeah.
related. It's related because if the terrorists are dead and they're not sitting in jails, and then we can't make exchanges for them. Okay, that's why it's relevant. But the joke is we already have on the books, we have the death penalty, we just don't use it. We only used it once, and that was against Adolf Eichmann. I think it was 1962, if I'm not mistaken. We don't use it. We don't need new laws. We've got them, okay? We're just too wussy. I mean, look, I don't like, the only reason I don't like the death penalty anywhere, I'm happy to have people be thrown in jail and let them rot in there. The trouble is that the Israeli jails for Palestinian terrorists have been very cushy. They get university degrees, they get to cook their own meals. I mean, Ben Gvir put a
Right.
stop to, and now, of course, again, he's ridiculed. But my point about it was, if they're dead, they can't be used as barter. Now, I used to say, look, I'm not that keen on the death penalty, even in the United States or whatever. I don't
Mhm.
really care one way or another if you make sure not to let out a dangerous criminal ever, ever again. And the death penalty, the only reason I would oppose it would be in case you made a mistake. There have been, we know, there are people convicted of crimes, let's say in the United States, and it turns out because of DNA and all this stuff that they were actually innocent. Okay. So if you were against the death penalty, that's one good reason to be against it. You can make mistakes. But in the case of the terrorists, the trouble is that they're never there for life, and if they can have a million life sentences, and then the progressive left wants them out anyway to run the Palestinian Authority. We have Marwan Barghouti sitting in jail, and the Israeli left says we should let him out and he should rule the Palestinians. And why? Because though he was responsible for many mass murderers, he's serving several life sentences. He personally, with his bare hands, did not commit any of those. I'm sorry, excuse me. Okay, so here's my point. That is why when you say, what do we do going forward? We already had in the past a commission of inquiry that said, we cannot exchange, we cannot ransom hostages with terrorists. We cannot do it. Did we? Well, we don't follow that. And why? Because as soon as there's new hostages, we say, okay, but wait a second. How come my son, you got Gilad Shalit and you let these ones and those ones, what about my kid? How come? Okay, that's why you shouldn't have parents anywhere near the decision makers. That's exactly was another split in Israeli society during this whole hostage crisis. If you dared to say, don't make deals with them, you were considered someone who didn't care about the lives of the hostages. It was just awful and disgusting. But anyway, I'm saying when you said, well, how do we move forward? We have got to end that kind of ransom. We've got to stop it because all it does is encourage more kidnapping. All right? That's all. And that's why they kidnapped 250 people on October 7th. That's why they knew, listen, it's enough you kidnap one. The Israelis, they'll just drop dead to get him back. And by the way, do you know, we used to say during this war when they're fighting, saying, excuse me, to get the lives of the hostages are really, really important, but so are the lives of the soldiers. They're all dying. How many soldiers have to die to get one hostage? There's no moral answer to that.
Yes.
But there is a moral answer. It is moral to put terrorists to death. To me, that's moral.
Okay. So I happen to agree with you. But I would also argue that the concessions are bigger than that. For example, let's give a big one. Hamas still controls 47% of Gaza because of the hostages, I will argue. So even if we do have death penalty for all convicted terrorists, the question is of leverage and should Israel continue to pay such high prices? And do we need a new actual maybe IDF policy where you sign a thing saying, I understand that if I'm captured, you know, I actually don't know the corollary to that statement. But does there have to be,
It's like the Hannibal directive. It's like, you kill your own and so that he's not captured if you need to. I mean, we have those things. Trouble is when you talk about it, there's got to be new directives. Things are on the books all the time.
yeah,
The question is, do you implement them? Okay, they're on the books.
right,
And we spend a lot of time. I mean, it's funny because there are a lot of hilarious laws that are still on the books in the United States in different
right.
states. Like you're not allowed to carry your guitar and or something. I mean, there's like,
Right.
so really, that's a law. And they're funny ones. And of course,
Yeah,
nobody's going to
yeah.
bother. How do you take them off? They're just funny. They're like, and but technically, they're on the books. Trouble is here, we've got all this on the books. Well, yes, we do need to change the rules of engagement. We need someone other than that progressive, never mind, Asa Kasher's. We need to completely eliminate his rules of engagement. But here's the thing. You're not going to change the nature of Israeli society, which, because it's
Yeah.
Jewish,
Yeah.
is also progressive. And it's also gets filled with liberals and progressives and bleeding hearts. It's just not going to happen. So I don't know. I don't
It,
know because
it's an impossible calculus for sure. But I'm wondering also what just struck me is if as Israelis turn 18, old enough to draft, right? Is 18 the when you go into
That's
the
the other
IDF
family.
or
Yeah,
after high school, whatever age that
yeah,
is? Um, what if at 18, even those who don't serve, let's say a Haredi male or whatever, somebody who's disabled, whatever it is, and is unable to serve, if when they draft at 18 and they're able to make their own decisions, they literally, like, I'm thinking in America here, when you get your driver's license at 16, you mark a box whether you want to be an organ donor or not.
right, right.
What if there was literally a thing that said, because I think we all thought about this, like watching this unfold. If I were a hostage, would I want X, Y, and Z to occur in my
Right.
name? And
The trouble is, you know what the trouble with that is that you don't know how you'd feel if it actually came time for it. So,
right.
for example, in countries where there's euthanasia, there have been some horrible cases where people said, "Yeah,
Yeah.
I want it," and then they changed their minds, and then it was too late because they already signed. And by the way, the organ donor thing like that in Israel too. I'll give you an example. I was at a meeting where people were signing organ donor cards, and we were told at this meeting, look, it's nice, let's all sign them, but it won't mean anything because what you have to do is tell your kids that you mean it, because even if you sign it, it's enough for your spouse or your kids to say, no, 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 I don't want to donate the organ. They can't. If I
Yep.
mean, like you're dead, like you're
Yeah.
brain dead or whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what I'm saying is we could all sign a card saying, if I'm taken hostage, I don't want to have anyone exchanged for me. But then let's say I'm raped and dragged into a
Yeah.
tunnel.
Yeah. Sure.
I might. So the point is you can't really put that on them and an 18-year-old soldier. But we did have soldiers whose parents read letters. They said after they were killed, they read letters their son wrote to them, like from the base or even before they went into Gaza,
Yeah.
saying, do not exchange. If I'm killed, don't exchange anyone for my body. They
Yeah.
did. There were
Yeah.
people who wrote that to their parents.
Yes. It's
And there
devastating.
were parents of hostages in particular, they were a separate hostage family group. The other hostage families hated them, who had hostages in Gaza, who said, no, no, no exchanges. We need military pressure. So they were vilified, but there were the good hostage families and the bad hostage
Right.
families, like
Well,
always.
yeah.
So I don't know if that would help. And I honestly,
Yeah. They're
so
impossible questions. I was just curious if it was
yeah.
something that you had thought about before. I mean, do you believe in a two-state solution, and has your position on this changed since October 7th?
Never believed in it. No, don't believe in it now. It's a lie. The whole thing is based on a lie. It isn't like, oh, let's just have two states living side by side. We know it's a lie. Every attempt was a failure and if you read the Arabic and you read the Arabic translations of what every group in the Palestinian Authority and everybody else says, no, I do not believe in it. It's dead.
Okay. So let me ask this as sort of an addendum to that question. If there is no two states, and let's say, would you see one state where Israel annexes both Judea, Samaria, and Gaza? Let me start there.
You know, again, these are such tricky questions. What I see is what the general outline, I can't tell you what it's specifically because you're already talking about like how do we divide, what do we do with the territory? No, the idea is there is a Jewish state, in one
Right.
Jewish state. It has citizens who are non-Jews,
Right.
Christians, Muslims, has citizens who are non-Jews. Just like countries have citizens, you are they're citizens, but it's a Jewish state. Like I grew up in America, everywhere was Christmas trees and we had Christmas pageants, and I was Jewish, and that was fine. I can go home and light Hanukkah candles, and in school and on the street there was Christmas trees. I mean, what I'm saying is Israel is a Jewish state. And that anybody else, any other issue, first of all, we already know this is not a land dispute, that we've always treated it like a land dispute. And therefore it's like,
Mhm.
okay, so you take this, and there's a West Bank, and there's this, and there's that. No, it's not a land issue at all. So the question is, how do you eliminate the jihadist intentions of your enemies? And you say, you can live here or now. In Gaza, for example, there wouldn't have been a problem if the Gazans, like you said, had used the greenhouses to plant flowers and we would all get along great and have great commerce. That would have been great, but that's not what they want. So what the ultimate solution, I don't know what it is, but I can tell you one thing. Kicking Jews out of anywhere, out of Gaza, out of Judea and Samaria, the idea that you kick out Jews instead of the vermin who want to slaughter Jews and Christians, that is crazy.
Yes.
Do you want to kick somebody out of somewhere? And I remember a disengagement. I had a big argument with someone who really trusted Ariel Sharon, who was about, and I said, look, if you go down to the Gaza border, you see a nice little, beautiful little houses and little tricycles, and next to it, you see mud, crap, kids
Right.
walking around barefoot. Said, which group are we kicking out of here? Okay, the ones who planted flowers. So what I'm saying is, and so I said, well, okay, so why don't you kick them out? Oh, come on, that's never going to happen. We'll never be allowed to. We'll never do it. And I said, I know, okay, I know that we'll never do it. So why do we get kicked out though?
Right.
We're the only ones who plant goddamn flowers.
Yes,
Okay.
I would say there are two challenges. One is that nobody wants them, right? We saw that when the 20-point plan came out, and they're like, well, send them somewhere else. We don't want them, and I think it was Australia that took like one plane and we're like, okay, enough. And in Canada, and like nobody really wants them. Egypt doesn't want them. Jordan doesn't want them. So the challenge is, first of all, if you kick them out, you can't kick them into the ocean. I mean, you can't put them in boats. So somebody has to be willing to take them. That's the first thing. But the second thing is, should we have one state, which for all intents and purposes, I would be 100% actually for taking all of it. Then we have a population issue, right? We first of all, we're not just absorbing millions of Arab Muslims who are having massive numbers of babies, and thereby just by virtue of population would threaten, even without war, of destroying the Jewish nature of the state, if not the Jewish state altogether. For that second half of the sentence, when I say the Jewish nation altogether, we're talking about absorbing a lot of terrorists. As you said, it's hard enough we see already how hard it already is to disarm the terrorists in Judea and Samaria. So if we were to absorb them, as I say we, because I believe in Am Yisrael, I live in Los Angeles, I'm still this nation. But if we absorb them, there's going to be such a cascade of problems that would come out of that.
Yeah, exactly. So there isn't a simple solution to it all because, but I will say the demography problem, it's interesting. Europe has a bigger one now than we do. And I'll tell you something, there was all that, oh my God, we can't. And there's, demography and they have babies. First of all, they're having fewer babies, okay? They are having fewer babies and Israelis have a lot of babies. Not just Haredim, not just ultra-Orthodox. Secular Israelis have a higher number of babies than the rest of the Western world. So that's one thing. And the other is that you can't just say, okay, this is our country, and you can't get citizenship just because you're a Muslim or something. And no, you can't do that. So there are other ways. But in the meantime, before we even get to that, first you have to acknowledge, and you have to have, and your Supreme Court too, you have to have it acknowledged that this is not about dividing land. It's not like, okay, because the left says, no, we got to separate from them. We got to separate and let them. We've tried that. We separate and they throw missiles at us. I mean, so no. So they need, for example, one of the things we haven't done is take over their school books at East Jerusalem. Here's a good example. They're raised to say, if you kill 2 Jews and then you kill 3 more, how many in total did you kill? We've got to take over, and in Gaza too, saying somebody has got to take over the education of those children because it is not the fault of a baby born to somebody who has that jihadist ideology. Not his fault that he grew up like that, but you've got to stop that chain. And I don't know how to, I mean, that's one way is
Yeah.
the education system. One thing we saw was money didn't do it, because you know something, all the billions of euros, dollars, and shekels that were poured into Gaza in the last 20 years,
Mhm.
they all had swimming pools and tennis courts and villas, every single Gazan. No. And they have crap. No, some they have nice neighborhoods there. By the way, the terrorists all live in villas over there. But I'm saying money isn't doing it. You have to change the mind frame. How do we do that? I don't know.
Yeah.
Again, I think we've got to start tackling. We've got to tackle those regimes, and that's why Iran. That
Yeah.
brings us back again. I say Iran, Iran, Iran.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
um,
Let's talk
yeah.
Iran.
Okay.
I want to, before we get to Iran, we're going to talk about Iran, but I want to talk about Bibi and Trump. So, of course, these two leaders are going to have differences in priorities and policies, but do you see any strategic daylight? We're just talking Iran now between Trump and
Um,
Benjamin Netanyahu.
no, the only daylight you see between Netanyahu and Trump is the daylight hoped for, fantasized, and written about by the likes of Barack Ravid in
That's right.
Axios and Ronen Bergman, and I can name, Israelis and also non-Israelis. Okay. No, there is no daylight. That is just something that the anti-Netanyahu and anti-Trump camp, they have been spending the whole war, like just gleefully saying,
Right.
there was daylight with Biden, by the way, that wasn't a lie, but with Trump there was, it hasn't been. And so this whole thing is, uh-oh, there it comes. There's a rift between Washington and Jerusalem. No, there isn't.
Okay, so Ruthie, I'm going to actually, I am not a conspiracy theorist at all, but sometimes because this has gotten so ridiculous. First of all, as soon as I hear the word Axios and or Barack Ravid, I'm like, okay, what this is. Like my first thought is this is Bibi and Trump playing with people's minds because this is their playbook. Let's pretend that we have a problem so that other people let their guard down, and then we're like, oh, just joking, we're best friends, and we go in and make the attack. And I'm beginning to think that Barack is in on this, that he's like, okay, I'll report it again, because come on, it's gotten stupid. We know that there is no daylight between
Right.
these two, and he keeps saying the same thing, and the more people believe it, the more our enemy will become vulnerable when these two, unite forces without restraint.
Well, that's a good point. But I'll tell you what's interesting is that during the Biden administration, Barack Ravid really did have access to the administration because he was on their side, and so they were leaking to him and all that. That wasn't false. And what they
Mm-hmm.
were leaking to him when it was, anti-Netanyahu was utterly believable because it wasn't exactly a secret. What happened with the Trump administration, now what you're saying is in a way they're toying with him, but my theory is it's one of two things. Either his access to his sources in the White House are like the janitor or something of the source, or yes, there are sources then there's another possibility, by the way, that there are sources who are closer to the Tucker Carlson camp, and they are, for example, we know that J.D. Vance's assistant press secretary is Tucker Carlson's son. Okay. So I'm not saying, I'm not trying to hurl, accusations at that, but it also could be that the leaks to Axios, to Barack Ravid, are coming from those kind of sources. And then a third possibility is that, as you said, that somebody is purposely leaking stuff to him because he's a stooge and he's so happy to have access that he'll print whatever they tell him. And especially if it says something negative about relations between Trump and Netanyahu. Well, we don't know what the truth is. There are times when I suspect that there are. Yes, it's not exactly that there are moles in the administration. It's not a secret that Tucker Carlson's son is J.D. Vance's assistant press secretary. That there's nothing. He was hired, and we know it. Okay. And we also know that Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, we know that they have interests in Qatar. We know that. This is not like a secret. So the question is, are they doing that on purpose or not? And my feeling is that basically Barack Ravid, like a lot of people, it's like the ones they get everything wrong, and you might as well use them as a negative gauge. Um, you know, like like a movie critic you don't agree with, say, okay, he likes that movie, I won't go see it. Um, I don't know. Although, he is saying that a strike on Iran is imminent. When Barack Ravid wrote that, I said, uh-oh, maybe it's not. Okay. So
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Ruthie, I know you're dying to say this. Okay. What is your prognostication for Iran? Will the US strike or will they strike a deal?
first of all, they can't strike a deal. No, no, they're not striking a deal. Okay, no. Now, first, my opinion of a deal is there is no such thing as a good deal. I know, and Trump says it, a deal, a good deal, blah, 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 and red lines and deals. The worst possible thing that could happen is if Iran agrees to all of Trump's conditions. If the mullahs agree to all the conditions, no nukes, no ballistic missiles, no terrorism proxies, no this, no that, no the other thing, we are really screwed because they lie and they won't stick to it and they might wait out his presidency, but that doesn't matter. They won't stick to any deal and they will lie. So we don't want them to, if they agreed to all of it, then Trump would say, oh, you see, I made a deal. But in the meantime, they're not even agreeing to any of it. All right.
Right.
Not totally eliminating the nukes and certainly not ballistic missiles and not the other stuff and not the other stuff. I think, and Trump's this way can go to all the Arabs who are telling him, no, don't attack Iran and all this, and the others who are telling him, and say, I tried my best. I did everything. Look, and we've been negotiating, negotiating. The other reason the worst thing that could happen is that any deal is signed is that I'm sure that any deal would involve easing on sanctions for Iran, and
Right.
that's no good. Also, Iran never lets the inspectors see the sites, so we wouldn't be able to verify, etc. Anyway, so the thing is, no, there is no choice. And if Trump doesn't do it, Israel will have to go it alone, which maybe we can't do, but there has been a lot of coordination. This movement of aircraft carriers and aircraft and Israel's, let me tell you, all night I hear planes over my building, and it's clear the Israeli Air Force is training. There is a lot of movement. We are preparing. We're told to, start maybe buying bottles of water. We don't know, etc. It has to happen. So when you ask me, like, do I think a deal is going to be signed? No, I don't.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny because not you, the Ayatollah, the IRGC has got to be stupid not to. I mean, because Trump is out in 3 years and they're going to have a cakewalk after that if they sign a deal now. But I think that it has to do with ego and that they can't, show their weakness. And by the way, I'm just going to go ahead and suggest to people, if they made it this far through the conversation, and Ruthie, I'm just enjoying this conversation so much, that they listen to the episode that you and Mark did of Israel in Undiplomatic yesterday about this very topic. But my favorite line was the negotiations.
Oh no, I said legitimacy or something like that because I said,
Yes,
why is always the moral forces requesting legitimacy
yes,
from the immoral ones? I'm sick of it already. We don't need legitimacy. We have it. We possess it. We, Israel, we, the United
yeah,
States. It exists. Anyone who what do we need to gain legitimacy from a bunch of third world dictators? What?
that's right.
Okay.
You mean the
Sorry.
United Nations when you say a bunch of dictators,
Yeah,
third world dictators?
yeah, and their fellow travelers and all that.
Yeah,
Sorry, we're going to kowtow to you. We're going to kiss your butt for
that's right.
legitimacy that you don't have in the first place. No, thanks. But okay, it's the way geopolitics works and strategy and all that. No, no. This is a major thing that has to happen. And let's not forget the Iranian people. Because
Yeah.
if any deal is signed, the regime stays in power, the Iranian people are quashed yet again, and all those tens of thousands were killed in vain after President Trump said to them, keep going, help is on the way.
Let me
And
let me
There's one thing we know that President Trump does not want to be compared to President Obama.
And everybody is. So let me stack on that actually, whether Trump strikes or not, I 100% believe that he will. But has America already let the Iranian people down in that respect or in any respect? Or because you could also argue when he said that help is on its way, help is on its way, has been on its way,
Yes.
but it would be silly to do a strike that doesn't finish the job at this point. Otherwise, we're right back where we started from in another 6 months, right? So I think that right now, both sides, quite frankly, I think are Iran and the United States are just pretending to negotiate to buy time. I think they both understand that. In also, I want to add when it comes to an actual deal, should there be a deal, and I don't believe there will be, but there's these sunset clauses that was like the real problem with the original JCPOA is that it's like, okay, well, don't enrich for 10 years, then you can do whatever you want. And I think that forever is a mighty long time. And I think that is why we have to seize this moment now. And I watch what goes on in social media. And yesterday it struck me, I'm like, do we as random person in LA, I mean, you've got much more knowledge than I do, but really think that I'm seeing some sort of information that the president of the United States does not have when I look and go, of course we have to strike, look at this, and this, obviously he knows. But okay, I'm sorry, that was a ramble. Has Trump already let the Iranian people down?
Well, yes and no. Okay. What do I mean by that? You're absolutely right. He had to get all the ducks in a row. This kind of strike is not like if you screw it up, it could do far more damage. Okay. And from what I understand from Israeli sources, reliable ones, initially when he said we're going to do it, Israel said, hold off, we're not ready yet. And then other things happened, etc. So, but the way he let them down was not because, okay, you say help is on the way, you're just going to go bomb. No, 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 no. I don't mean that Trump did that. But his mouth sometimes goes off before he thinks carefully because when he said it, the Iranian people took that to mean he's behind us, we're going out. And meanwhile, they're getting slaughtered, slaughtered, slaughtered. And when he said it, he meant it. But it sounded to me too. It sounded like this week there's going to be a strike. Okay. And then, so he let them down in the sense that I think they didn't grasp that this was Trump talking, if you know what I mean.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
just
yeah.
what comes into his what comes into his mind goes out of his mouth.
That,
And it's not that it was wrong, but he
yep.
didn't say, look, help is on the way, but it's going to take us 8 more weeks or
Yeah,
whatever it
yeah.
is. He said, look,
Right,
we got to
right.
get, okay. So, and maybe even his saying that, it's true, many, many Iranians were gunned down by those disgusting, not only the Revolutionary Guards, it was also their police security forces, the Basij militias. They also had Iraqi mercenaries come in and I mean, to kill people in the streets. So, I think that when he did it, that he didn't mean for tons of more thousands to be killed, but he did spur them to be brave, to continue being brave, and that was problematic. So I can't blame him. You always have to blame the killers and not,
That's right.
tendency in the West to blame. It's like saying Netanyahu is at fault for October 7th. No, 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 no. The murderers are at fault for
That's
October
right.
7th. Same thing. I say Trump is not responsible for those deaths.
That's
It's
right.
just that it's possible if he had waited, counted to 10 before saying that, he might have worded it differently.
That's right.
He might
That's
not
right.
put it on Truth Social. Keep going, healthy. He might have said, something like, I can't disclose what's going on, but trust me,
Right.
I know you're right, or I'm supporting you. Just some other wording, because
Yes.
if you go back and read that post of his, I thought
Yes.
it's happening any minute now.
Yes. And I have to say, I actually addressed this in a paratrooper and a yogi walk into a bar last week. In that there was this statement. It was so ludicrous. I don't remember who it was. Maybe the foreign minister of the IRGC, who literally said 3,000, because he didn't specify what the 3,000 are, but I'm going to assume that it's the 3,000 that the IRGC are claiming were all that was killed in even if it was just 3,000, by the way, as compared to 35 or up to 80, 90,000, people are saying like that's still like 3,000 of your own people. That's still unforgivable.
Exactly.
But he literally said in words, Trump is responsible for the murder of 3,000 of our citizens. The implication being that never mind that we're the ones that actually shot them. It's Trump's fault. Right, it's Trump's fault because he encouraged them. Yeah. And so, yes, this displacement, it's the whole thought of also like guns don't kill people.
I certainly don't blame him for that. I just want to know, look, everything in hindsight, you're always smart in hindsight, because after October 7th, you know how many people, including my own brother, he was saying to me week after week, and my son was down at the border and they were training and everything. When are they going in? When is the idea of why isn't he going in already? Because the ground forces weren't ready yet.
That's right.
Okay. We had some air activity, air bombing. There was this impatience. What's going on? What's going on? What's going on? And so that does tend to happen with us. We get this, we say, oh my God, he's not doing anything, or now, it wasn't true. It wasn't true.
Of course.
They had to train the troops, had to get the tanks ready, and that's what's happening now too, with all these aircraft carriers, with the coordination between the U.S. Army and the Israeli Army and Navy and Air Force is really, really important, and it's going on all the time.
Yeah.
And just to show you how disgusting the anti-Netanyahu camp is, when Netanyahu made his trip last week, his quickie trip to Washington, and and there was no press conference afterwards. They said, yeah, we spoke about Iran. Netanyahu said, yeah, we spoke about Iran and Gaza, blah, blah, blah. So he comes back. Obviously, there was serious coordination going on in that meeting. Okay, that's why he flew there urgently.
Sure.
Guess what the Israeli left said about it? They said, oh, he was only going there to tell Trump to pressure President Herzog to give him a pardon. Right. Really, yes. He flew across the world to tell Trump, as though Trump listens to anybody, right? In other words, he's going to give Trump orders about that. That's ridiculous. We have urgent business going on, and our progressives are just, it's like they're a big joke, and they do so much damage. It's not funny. They're a joke. They're an unfunny joke.
I do believe that Trump painted Bibi into a bit of a corner in pushing that pardon, to be honest. I think that the fact that Bibi's on trial in the middle of while executing a war is absolutely, again, suicidal and ridiculous. But I think that politically, because pardons don't work in Israel the same way that they work in America. And I think that sometimes Trump is like he has no regard for or understanding that like the whole world doesn't operate exactly the way that your world does. So in America, the president literally just signs a piece of paper and you're pardoned. That's not how it happens in Israel. And so I think that he made it uncomfortable for Bibi that, Bibi had to write this letter. And I think that doubling down on that was not necessarily a very diplomatically sound maneuver by Donald Trump, to be honest.
No, it wasn't, but it really it didn't stem from Bibi's pressuring Trump.
Right, exactly.
From Trump's over-identification about lawfare, because lawfare has been used against him.
That's right.
And he sees Netanyahu as undergoing the same kind of thing. Rightfully, by the way, he sees that. And so when he does that, he's really, it comes out of his own his own sense of justice. And it's true, it doesn't really work that way in Israel, but on the other hand, it does, and it doesn't anyway. What's complicated is that usually a pardon comes after you're convicted of something, and Netanyahu on years and has years more to go with no conviction. and his cases are falling apart. So really,
Yeah,
originally, he just wanted to prove his innocence, but then the war, there was the pandemic, and then the war, and I mean, it's like, I mean, this trial is ridiculous,
yeah,
but it's true. Trump, the thing though is Trump did that, and so the
that's right.
Israeli left accuses Netanyahu of being behind it,
That's
and
right.
I want to say to them, honestly, of all the leaders in the world, Trump. What do you think? He's Bibi's ventriloquist dummy that Bibi just says, "Oh, you got to do this for me." Are you
Right.
kidding?
Ex-
Trump would shove him out of his office if he tried
Yeah,
to do something like that. So,
yeah,
I mean, the idea that Trump would be pressured by Netanyahu is insane.
of course
That's
it
all I'm saying. And blaming Netanyahu for that is ridiculous.
agree. Agree. So with Iran, I'm curious. It doesn't seem for some reason that Trump has the faith in Reza Pahlavi that the people do, and that Pahlavi certainly does. And I'm very impressed that Pahlavi is not looking to come in as a dictator to install himself as some sort of king or leader, but rather to be the temporary executor of a democratic process, which he's laid out very, very clearly. Pahlavi has. So I'm should Pahlavi be instated as the leader of a new and free Iran. And these legendary, I can't even say it without smiling, not laughing, but literally just smiling from the inside out. Should these Cyrus Accords be signed? It makes me want to cry to even say the words. Will that change the whole face of the Middle East? Will it change
I
the face of the world?
Yes, I really believe so. Though, that's not our only problem. We got North Korea, we got China, we got Russia. I mean, oh, okay. So no, it wouldn't save the whole world. It would definitely change the face, definitely. And let me tell you why Iran, unlike Gaza and all these other countries, I don't like, whatever, they'll call me an Islamophobe. I don't even care anymore. Whatever. The Arab countries, it's not even Islamophobe. The
Yeah,
Arab countries, let me tell you something. The Iranian people, they are not Arabs. They get
right.
really pissed off if anybody likens them to Arabs. Just as you said, the Arab countries don't want the Palestinians because they consider them the dregs. The Iranians considered Arabs the dregs, and they are culturally, they are culturally not at all Islamists. I mean, not a lot of them aren't even religiously Muslim, right? They were Zoroastrian. A lot of them apparently converted to Christianity over the last 3 decades in basements. They're like, you know, uh, they do it in secret. But the point is, their culture is nothing like you kill 2 Jews and you add three more, and how many Jews did you kill? No, no, that is not their culture. They're actually very, very cultured, educated people who were taken over by those monsters. And if you see pictures of Iran in the 1970s before the
Yes.
revolution, women in miniskirts with a cigarette hanging out of their mouth discussing literature at cafes.
Yep.
Okay? All right? That is that is who they are. They are a different kettle of fish, so that if they get out from under the regime, their culture has a great chance to just emerge again, flourish, because they are not like those ayatollahs, the Iranian people, for the most part. They're just not.
Yeah, and a point that you repeat a lot on your show, Israel Undiplomatic, that you didn't say oddly enough in that statement right there, and that I want to make sure people understand is that when she's talking about the nature of the Iranians, she's talking about the society is separate from the regime. So you did make statements that said regime, but I don't think that people necessarily understand that differentiation.
Right.
Yeah, but to imagine a real and literal, not a cold bullshit peace like the way Israel has with semi with Jordan, but definitely bullshit peace with Egypt. I do see war breaking out there sooner than later.
Yeah.
If we had a real,
Turkey.
honest,
Turkey. Oh my God, another mortal enemy and a supporter of
yes.
Hamas.
So this is actually my next question, though, is okay, so let's say that Iran, the billions of dollars that they can't give their people food, water, electricity, the real is worth less than zero. There's no internet. They're like, but they have billions of dollars to send to their proxies. Once that dries up, let's assume the best. Let's assume that Pahlavi, the Cyrus Accords, all the things happen. There's no more terrorist proxies coming from Iran. How quickly will that vacuum be filled by Turkey and Qatar? I mean, so how much is it going to affect, honestly, the order of the Middle East when it comes to terrorist proxies, if only they become, I mean, they're already Turkish and Qatari proxies also. They're not solely Iranian as people sort of like frame them to be. So how much does this really ultimately change anything?
Well, that's a good question also because the coffers really don't dry up in Iran with Qatar and others and North Korea and China slipping them stuff in there. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on behind the back of sanctions and all that, right? And yes, there will be a vacuum filled. It's always like that. I mean, I don't what one of the answers to that is you can't rest. I mean, you meaning if you want, a free societies, you're going to have to fight for it. Americans for so long, especially when I grew up, it was like there's nothing to fight for and blah blah blah. Um, no, you have to keep fighting. So when you say, well, what happens if, another evil force fills the vacuum, then you have to fight against it also. You can't rest. Okay. It isn't like, okay, we achieved, it would be like saying we achieved the founding fathers, we had a Bill of Rights, we have a constitution, we had this, America was settled. Okay, let's go to sleep. No.
Yes.
Okay. Israel, the same thing. Israel was just established and all the countries went to war against it and it's been fighting ever since. And you know what? Sorry, guys. Yes, you have to fight for it, especially when you're the good guys. You have to, because otherwise you'll get swallowed up by the bad guys. I mean, it is so primitively simple. That, by the way, that logic Trump has really, really ingrained in him. And his only mistake, in my opinion, is that he does misjudge leaders who are nice to him and often gives them, credit for being, oh, this is such a nice guy. That, the terrorist who runs Syria and the terrorist lover supporter who runs Turkey and Qatar, which unfortunately has seeped in all over the world, paying, it's an ATM machine, Qatar. That's basically what it is. And I mean, the joke that it's even part of a board of peace when it's funding terrorism, it's funding all the bad actors, it's funding all those protests in universities across the world, it's funding. So my answer when you said, then what happens? Yeah, you have to just keep fighting, unfortunately. You got to live by the sword. That's the answer. That's the answer, I
mean,
guess.
it's as an Israeli, you could just like toss that off because it's always been the reality there, and people don't understand what it means to face existential threat every single day of your life. It's I've always said this even before this war. I mean, so in the latest happiness index that just came out last week, Israel was number 2, which is amazing when you think about
For the under 30-year-olds.
Under 30. Yeah.
Under 30-year-olds, which is even more impressive.
Yeah, because those are the kids who are in the war too. But I've always said Israel is an insanely happy country because of the old proverb, live each day as if it were your last. People don't understand that Israel, that's not a proverb. Israel, you never know, like if the next day is going to be your last. It sounds dramatic, but 10/7 was a perfect example. And that Israel, like we choose life, right? Am Yisrael Chai, like this is all about life and living and thriving. And so I want to talk a little bit about like Hatikva, not the song, but the actual hope, because there is something to be said for peace, as naive as it might seem. So who do you think will be the next countries to join the Abraham Accords? I mean, Azerbaijan, I mean, so I understand, okay, but they're not like in the immediate ring. I mean, we're talking about countries like Syria is looking less and less, Saudis are going back and forth, Lebanon, I mean, countries that you would never imagine. Who do you think actually will of import? I mean, Oman, I mean, who might join the Abraham Accords? Indonesia, who do you see?
Well, I know there was all this talk about Saudi Arabia before the war broke out, and Netanyahu used to talk about that all the time. And the Saudis let us use their airspace, and Saudis. Saudi Arabia has been playing a really bad game recently, so I really say forget that. No, Saudi Arabia has not signed the Abraham Accords unless, I don't know, something changes. You can never say never. But and by the way, don't forget, Saudi Arabia is not some peace-loving, they still chop people's hands off if they are caught shoplifting and stuff like that. You're not talking about, I mean, as much as President Trump said, how he says, oh, and MBS, and everyone talks about him like he's so modern. And, he is maybe, okay, maybe he is Western and all that. But his country, oh yeah, and he gave women the right to drive about 5 minutes ago. I'm sorry, okay, let's not get too excited about Saudi Arabia. And Lebanon might have been okay if we can get rid of Hezbollah. See, it all depends on that. And I don't know about that because I want to make sure that the countries that already did sign the Abraham Accords don't think out on them. That's first and foremost. Because when I started hearing negative talk coming from some of our partners during the war, I said, oh, that's no good. That's no good. So we'll see. I don't know, right? I don't know about that. But peace, I really do believe both Netanyahu and Trump, and they say peace through strength. And that's what I mean by living by the sword.
Yeah.
Not that you need to use your sword all the time. But if you put it down, you are the sitting duck, right? And it applies to nuclear weapons as well. You know how many people have said, oh, you say Iran can't have nuclear weapons. Israel has nuclear weapons, allegedly, okay? Yeah, except Israel is not a bad actor.
That's right.
Israel doesn't have a genocidal regime. I mean, liars say we don't. We don't.
That's right.
So it isn't a question of whether you have nuclear weapons or not. It's in whose hands they are. So that's what I'm saying again about the sword. It all depends on whose hands. You want the sword in your hand, not in, let's say, the homeless drug addict, anti-Semite on the subway's hand, right? I mean, I'm saying if you put it in terms that someone can understand, you need the weapons. You want to protect yourself from the forces of evil trying to obliterate you. And then the better you are at them, the less likely you're going to need to use them. That's it.
That's right. That's right. So as we wrap up, I do want to, I never want to stop talking, but I do want to say, like him or hate him, Benjamin Netanyahu, as I mentioned before, I do believe that he is the man who transformed Israel literally into a global superpower. We're talking about one of the smallest countries on earth that is now considered to be the eighth most powerful nation on earth. It's really mind-blowing. And honestly, what people outside of Israel probably don't even realize is that all polling that I've seen, literally across the board, every single poll still has Likud far in the lead, but the real issue is the coalition. Regardless, whenever it comes, either by election or retirement, I'm curious, Ruthie, who do you think comes after Bibi, whether Likud stays in control or not? And honestly, because I racked my brain over this, is there anyone who can actually fill his powerful and in very influential shoes?
Well, no, and yes.
Okay.
No, because he is one of a kind. He is not only the greatest leader Israel's ever had, he's certainly the longest serving,
Hmm.
but he is definitely up there with the greatest leaders the world has ever had, including if you hate him. All right, I'm sorry. He is a world leader of monumental proportions and will go down in the history books as such. All right. Um, by the haters, they can say what they want, but they don't dispute his gravitas or his political genius, even if they think he's bad. Okay. But so I say no in the sense that he's not replaceable in that sense. In another sense, everybody's replaceable because we all drop dead at some point. And he could get hit by a bus tomorrow, or he could die of old age. But he's already 76. Okay, so now my father just lived till 96.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that my father was with it up until night. He couldn't have been the leader of a country, and neither can Netanyahu be the leader of a country at 96, in my
Sure.
opinion.
Sure.
And there's a lot of talk about putting age limits in the United States as well. It's getting to that point where you say, you know something, you know that driving, as I read that a person over a certain age drive with a driver's license who's still driving as a senior citizen, his reflexes are worse than a drunk driver's.
Wow.
And that's statistically a fact. So if your reflexes are worse than a drunk driver's when you hit a certain age, and each individual is slightly different, okay? Um, then imagine that person leading a country. And we saw what happened with Biden. Biden had to be, I mean, I felt sorry for him because I could see he had dementia, having been familiarized myself with dementia from family members and everything. He clearly had dementia and he was supposedly running the United States, which he wasn't because they were doing it for him with the auto pen and all that. And Netanyahu doesn't have dementia, and Trump doesn't have dementia. But let's face it, Trump is going to be 80 in the summer. And so he has another 3 years to go. So it's like he'll be 83. Netanyahu, if he's prime minister another 4 years, he'll be 80. So the question is, at what point is that, because in the parliamentary system, it's not like Trump is not allowed to run again. But
Right.
Netanyahu could go on forever and ever because we don't we have a multi-party system and coalitions. So I say everybody's replaceable in that sense because we all die. Do I have any figures in Israel I really like? So first of all, what
Yeah.
we don't know is there's someone in high school right now who could be the next Netanyahu, and we don't know who he
Sure.
is because he's off at the Boy Scouts or something. Okay, like we don't know. Just as we hadn't heard of Netanyahu until he emerged.
Right.
So we don't know. There is a political figure in Likud I greatly admire, and I have a lot of hopes for him, and that is the Speaker of the Knesset, Amir Ohana. He's my personal favorite.
Okay.
I mean he's going to run to head the Likud because nobody wants to run against Netanyahu, but he is in Likud,
Right.
Amir Ohana. He's the whole package. He's smart, he's a lawyer, he's right wing, he knows his stuff. Now he's gay, so some people say, well, then he can't be prime minister. I don't believe that because he's Speaker of the Knesset. No, they say that
Hmm.
because the parties won't, but they allow,
Okay. Hmm.
but I mean, the point about him is he's a traditional Jew and he's gay. He's married with 2 children, married to a man and he is brilliant. And I've heard him speak. He also speaks really good English. He's also tall and handsome. Never minimize that in politics. By the way, tall and handsome, somebody did a study that in the
Absolutely.
United States, if you looked at all the elections from George Washington on, almost always the taller candidate won. Just
Yep.
that I'm saying why. So he's my guy, but that
Okay.
doesn't mean he's got any chance or that he wants to. I'm just saying I have my eye on him.
Okay. I
He's one to
personally,
watch. Pay attention. Pay attention to him. He's one to
I
watch.
will. I will. I personally, even though he's not even a politician, would love to see Conriquez come in. I think that he would do an amazing job. He has unparalleled diplomatic skills. He is clean as a whistle. So any of the controversy about, whatever corruption or this or that, I think that he would be a nice antidote, and people respect him. I love the guy. So I'm also interested to see if Einat Wilf's party goes anywhere. I think that I could see
don't
her.
see how it will. I don't see how she'll make it through past the threshold. And the thing with Enriquez also is that he hasn't created now. Einat Wilf created a party, and she's the
Yeah,
head of the party, and she needs 4 whole seats to be even to get into the Knesset.
yeah,
Conriquez isn't. Now, the trouble with our multi-party system is you may like him, but if he has
he has
any
to be a
chance
part.
in
Yep,
Likud, no,
that's right.
otherwise, at the moment, because if he formed his own party right now, he can't.
Sure.
There's no way enough the way Naftali, except if he becomes a con man like Naftali Bennett, who with no hardly any seats pulled a fast one and joined all the left and the Arab parties together and
Yeah,
became prime minister in a very underhanded legal way. He didn't do anything illegal with that. That was perfectly legal. So Cornick, as you say, the only way he could be in the Knesset is either if is given a high slot on a party that's guaranteed
yeah,
to be there, or if he runs in a primary and wins a high slot. But
yeah,
at the moment, so that's what I'm saying. And Einat Wilf is not doing this. She didn't say, okay,
yeah,
I'm joining Likud, Labor, or not Labor, there's no more Labor, it's called the Democrat, or well, another party. So I just don't see it likely that she'll get in. I could be wrong,
yeah.
obviously.
Yeah, I'm wondering though, now that the Arab parties have decided to join together, is it going to be, God,
It's
is
very,
it
very
it is
powerful.
yeah, is there really a possibility of forming a coalition without putting the Arab bloc into it now, and how is that going to
The
affect, like,
left can. No, but no, the left can't form a coalition without putting them in. No, not at the moment. I mean, unless something changes, you never know. Okay, you're talking about polls. Are polls accurate, and are they accurate this many months before an actual election? I don't know. But I mean, the left at the moment, there's no way the anti-Netanyahu bloc can form a coalition without the Arab parties, and even with them, they might not be able to.
and if in considering that 2 million Arabs that live as free and equal citizens in Israel and therefore have equal voting rights, hey,
Mhm.
I would assume,
And vote for the Arab parties. Just so you should know,
right?
not all the Arab Israelis vote for the
Sure,
Arab party. Some of
sure.
them vote Likud, some of them vote, and because some of them consider the Arab parties to be evil, or not, that all they care about is the Palestinians. They don't care about their constituents. They don't care about that. They don't care about making society for their own constituents better. All they do is scream about how Israel's an evil occupier and the Palestinians. And a lot of the Arab Israelis are fed up with them. Rightly so. They should
Yes,
be fed up.
but we're talking about 20% of the country. And what we see in
Yep.
America, for example, hold on one sec, is that we saw it with Mamdani, that had Sliwa not run, that it's possible that Cuomo could have, because of the splitting of the vote. So I'm not saying that.
Probably not.
I personally know Arab Israelis that will not vote for the Arab bloc. So I understand that. But I am very, very concerned that should they become a growing power within the Knesset, that could really undermine the ultimate security of the state. I mean, the Ram Party became a kingmaker when they were allowed into Bennett's coalition. So I really fear that in the future, and it also seems like any future coalition is going to have to make a decision between either the Arabs or the Haredis, and I don't know that
Yeah.
either one is a particularly strong asset for any coalition. But the coalition government system, as far as I can see, in Israel has become untenable. So yeah. Anyway,
We'll see, but again, they have that many seats. The thing is that this way, the seats, the voters who vote for any of the Arab parties, none of those votes are going to go into the garbage because they joined forces.
Yeah.
When they were split and they had a few different ones, then it was a little trickier for them. And you're right, the Haredim. On the other hand, it's possible that the right-wing bloc could form a coalition without the Haredim, but they would need the Ben Gvir and Smotrich and all that, anyone who has a fantasy of a large or wide range, let's say, national unity kind of coalition with the center, I think is kidding himself because they are so against. It's not just the Haredim; they're also against national religious. They're against most of whom. Not only did they serve in the army, they have more national religious soldiers who got killed in the army than anybody else in the war. And the leftists hate them too because whatever. But the point is, if everyone is boycotting everyone, at the moment, the right-wing bloc would have a chance, since the society has moved more to the right. It's possible they could do it without the Haredim, but the left cannot do it without the Arabs, unless the only way they could is if they were willing to serve in a coalition under Netanyahu, and good luck in that one. So we'll see.
Exactly. Okay, Ruthie, last question. Boy, we have gone for 2.5 hours. I thank you so much for the extraordinary generosity of your time and your energy and your wisdom. The last question is a softball. What does Am Yisrael Chai mean to you?
Well, that's a good question. You know, something when I was a young girl and I hadn't moved to Israel yet, it would have meant to me, it sounded like a cheer at summer camp or something. Living in Israel, it's like I have other slogans that I say more. I mean, I'll say that, but I just feel it. Like I live it. What it means to me is is more like if you say it, what does it evoke in me? It evokes in me. The other day there was a huge sandstorm here. It was like disgusting. The Mediterranean was like brown, and there was, people were told stay inside. There's too much pollution. It was a desert kind of sandstorm, and I had to walk. I was on my way somewhere. And in the middle of the sandstorm, and on the news is get ready because we might be bombing Iran, a whole bunch of Israelis dancing, folk dancing on the boardwalk in the middle of the sandstorm with the news about that, dancing to Israeli folk music and doing couples dancing and ballroom dancing on the boardwalk. So that's when you say Am Yisrael Chai, that's what I see.
Yeah, that's what I see. Thank you so much, Ruthie. It's been an absolute honor and a pleasure. And I look forward to listening to you and Mark on Israel Undiplomatic for a very long time to come. Your links are all in the show notes below. And before we go, let me just say, Am Yisrael Chai.
Amen. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure being with you, Shana.
Thank you. You too.